Okay, it is 7:02. We will get started with the November 23rd meeting of the Greenwich Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. First item of business is seating of alternates. Jay, looks like you're in today. We do have a new member. Some of you have met Mr. Fong. He is not here at the moment, but he will probably be joining us shortly. Second item on the agenda is the review and approval of the draft minutes of October 26. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any questions regarding them?
Motion approved.
Okay, sir. Okay. Motion by Mr. Scufolo, seconded by Mr. Carr. All in favor? Okay, very good. Next up is the director's report. Hello.
The various elements that go into compliance, and I think we're pretty solid at setting our goal for 100 compliance inspections a month. And of course, there will be variations on the up and down side, but that I think is a good, solid goal for us. You'll see in the information that I sent out to the agency, there was some background information, the public hearing procedures. I wrote out the elements associated with that, with a new agency member that should be helpful to him in particular, but certainly I hope that it's helpful to everybody as a whole. And if we're going to be using public hearings on a more consistent basis, I think it will be helpful that we're all on the same page. I also sent around the area's town's bond procedures. If you'll notice, it's pretty much one end of the spectrum or the other. It's either bond for things 100% retail installed, in some cases plus some, or other towns have just opted out. But the towns that have opted out say it's just simply not worth the amount of time that goes into collecting and then distributing the bonds back to make it worth their while. There was a general acknowledgement that you'd wind up in court if you had anything particularly serious. I'm not so sure my experience coincides with that, but I certainly do understand where those towns are coming from, because certainly is an administrative component to it. Associated with public outreach, been working this month a fair amount with the Harbor Management Commission. In the event that some are not aware, there is a draft harbor management plan out for public comment. There's been a fair amount of concern within the land use agencies that the plan lacks sufficient specific information that would allow the town to consistently make decisions based on defined goals. For us in particular, there's certainly a recognition that what happens inland will necessarily affect the harbors. That's the way that works. Where our jurisdiction lies is kind of a funky disconnect between the ecological way things work. I did ask the Harbor Management Commission if they had any case law that sort of tested how far we can, I don't want to say push, but utilize the information that they have in order to more fully assess our applications. I've not heard anything back, and I've not had the opportunity to do any research of that on my own. My sense is that the agency can certainly discuss some things. You know, nitrogen, pretty much everything that happens inland affects our inland resources so we're not floating out there just doing marine environment. I would say that the agency would be careful if we got to a point where the only thing that was a problem within an application is something that was inconsistent with the harbor management plan. Then I'd say we were probably on shaky grounds at that point. But I don't see that happening really all that often at all. The primary thing I find that the harbor management lacks for this agency's use, those lack of specifics do not allow us to reference back to the document in a meaningful way to pursue lines of questioning. Water quality should be addressed, and that's too broad. You know, is nitrogen a problem? What's their goal as far as nitrogen in a particular harbor? Bacteria, how many days is the beach closed in one harbor? What's the goal? So those are more tangible things that we can work on. There's a TMDL, I believe, for the harbors for bacteria, and that was not discussed. So those are the sorts of things that would allow us to, like we do with the Plan of Conservation Development, reference back to specific goals of the community that we can then pursue during our project-by-project dealings with the town. I don't know that I attended the Harbor Management Commission meeting, not this last week, but I think the week before, and I'm not sure that they wholly understand the significance of how this agency has to operate and the importance of having tangible pieces of information for us to refer back to. So they have the comments, you all have them in your packets, and the unfortunate thing is we'll just continue on. We do what we do, and it would be nice if we could also help further a town goal, but without the tools, we just can't. Let's see.
When do you expect to get feedback on your comments?
I don't know that I will. Not really sure. There's
Because they were pointed and specific. I mean,
right. We started off the three conservation, planning, and zoning wetlands. Started off by giving broader overviews of the types of issues that we felt that the management plan was not addressing conceptually, and then we were told it's too broad. I don't know what you mean. Come back with specifics. And then I was told that they didn't really understand what the specifics meant to them. The town planner ended up rewriting sections, and they thought that was too specific. So, I do feel a little, three bearish here of what's the right balance, what are they looking for? So we'll continue to work, and it's still certainly my goal to help them as best I can get to a place where this agency can support what they're working towards.
Can I ask a question? Other towns must have done plans like this, and have other wetlands agencies contributed and given input that we can help the Harbor Management Committee understand?
Their consultant is taking a different take on some things. We have actually directed the Harbor Management Commission to, I think it was Guilford, Madison, Westbrook, up the coast where there were some good examples. By good examples, the state DEP said, hey, go look at these when the land use agencies were questioning our concerns. And there is more definitive information. There's, if you're going to mention how the inland wetlands agencies should be helping with this, they have to do a stronger job of tying it back. And the consultant was not really open to those plans that the state was recommending as good examples. So we did try, yes. At a staff level, Jenny Colucci, who is a wonderful asset to the agency and the land use departments as a whole, has expressed her intent to file her paperwork for retirement. January 31st would be her last day. I think I know I remember when I first came and Brian was showing me the office and saying, well, that's where Jenny Colucci sits. You will come to depend on her. She does a fabulous job. No question. That woman has got her act and our acts all together. She will be sorely missed. I accepted the tough news, moved on to Human Resources, so we're going to try to fill that position, and then hopefully have Jenny come back in February to do some training, because the information she works with is fairly detailed. And then lastly, we had the hearing on the 0 Indian Springs Road, the violation, where the agency was frustrated with the continual violations coming out of the same project and the same set of people. The agency had directed staff to institute a violation. Each violation gets the $1,000 citation, and both the homeowner and the contractor. That was appealed, so that was 2 $14,000 citations that went out. Not surprisingly, that was appealed. We had our hearing on that before the last meeting, but the decision was not rendered in time. Since that meeting, there's a couple of things that have come to light, which, overall I'm pleased with the outcome. There is some language, and the attorneys on the agency will recognize it, I'm sure, jointly and severally. And I don't think we had the understanding when that language was included in the overall ordinance, what that actually meant. And what it actually means is you only get to issue the one fine, and then the parties sort of figure out who's responsible for it. So that is not my understanding of the intent of the agency. So if that is correct, then I will work with town council, and we'll work through the process of what it would take to amend that. And then the other major question that the violators had was considering a violation and what they would have considered a piecemeal. So if we had 3 wetland areas and there was fill within the regulated areas associated with those 3 wetlands, we were counting those as 3 separate violations, and that they did not care for that way of interpretation. The hearing officer agreed with the interpretation, and the $14,000 fine stood. So that's pretty good victory. So I think that covers.
Thank you, Pat.
Yes.
You
So
done?
is the consensus of the agency that jointly and severally was not the intent? I don't even like the word, so if we could get rid of it, separately. Is it something you want to speak about at a subsequent meeting?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the issue.
All right, I can give you some background. I don't believe it was the intent of the agency to have a citation ordinance where if, let's say, an example, a property owner ordered a contractor to do something, the contractor then did it, we wouldn't be able to fine both of them.
Separately?
The idea was that every person involved in a violation could be issued a citation if that's what we felt the matter warranted. And I think that was pretty clear. I mean, generally, the agency was looking for a means to make it, get contractors' attention, knowing that the property owner would have to make the corrective action on their property and would, probably pay additional filing fees and et cetera. But like in this case, the agency felt it was important that, after repeated violations on the same properties, to cite both the property owner and the contractor. So
So joint and several means they're both responsible fully, separate.
Not separately.
Not separate.
That's Norma. So we're allowed to issue one fine, and then the parties that are involved figure out who pays what portion of that one fine.
When we issue the fine, do we issue it to both parties? We name both?
Right, so previously, we would have issued, in Bob's scenario where you have the homeowner and the contractor, homeowner 1,000, contractor 1,000. The way our ordinance reads, we're actually only able to issue $1,000 citation to the both of them collectively. We would only get $1,000 back, and who paid for it is
Their problem.
their problem. So the
I think they're both.
favor of the agency?
Both responsible.
I'd like to get the sense of the members. My feeling is that it's,
The ordinance as drafted says joint and several.
I guess my feeling would be that a single fine is what, at least in my mind, the intent of the agency would be. I'm not sure how the rest of the agency feels about that. Jay, do you have an opinion?
I'm not an attorney, I can't really determine which way it's supposed to go. I mean, if the words jointly and severally mean that all parties are responsible and they just divide the fine up between them, is that our intent? If there are more than, there's more than one party, if one directs the other to do something and both are wrong, is it appropriate to fine both? In which case you'd have to amend the regulation.
And I think it might help if you think of a situation where you're not talking about the property owner and a contractor, you're talking about, let's say, a real estate agent and a contractor. So somebody's preparing a property for sale, and the realtor says, oh, go clear those trees, and the contractor does it. You know, I believe that, I mean, I've lived through all three versions of the ordinance going through the RTM, and the discussion was every person involved in a violation could be issued a citation if the agency felt it was that serious.
Well, in your example, either one of them could be held fully liable for
No, that's,
the fine.
If you just Google joint and several, it says that you can go after one or all of the parties involved in an issue.
But only one
you
time.
can go after one, but one fine.
But only one fine,
I mean,
So one fine or one amount, what do you?
one amount.
it's one fine. The point is that the harmed party is fully restituted. And the purpose of joint and several is to give a whole remedy to the harmed party. And if one party, for example, is incapable of paying, you can get the full amount from the other party. So what's the harm? I'm not,
What if you have two people who caused the problem, the owner and the contractor? They both are culpable in our view.
they're both responsible fully for the fine. How they apportion payment is a separate matter.
Right, but it's one.
But all we're concerned with is restitution for the harm.
But whereas we would have fined, in this case, $1,000 to each party, we could say the violation is a $2,000 fine, you all figure it out.
I mean, the hearing officer, I have to look at the ordinance again, theoretically could say in your example, Bob, you're 50% responsible. If one or the other doesn't pay that 50%, then the other one has to pay. The premise is to be making the harmed party whole. They're all responsible, and it's not an apportionment per se.
I would say there's an advantage to holding each person accountable separately. I have the sense that contractors who are aware that they have a financial exposure think differently than when they feel they can just push it off on the homeowner and be on their way.
But that's really between the homeowner and the contractor.
Well, I consider the citation.
They are held accountable. The question here is how the mechanism for.
The homeowner has more at stake than the
Well,
contractor.
that's absolutely true, but I'm just saying, let's not confuse the concept. They are being held responsible, whether in the context of their commercial dealings with a homeowner, they're saying, that's your problem, I'm not dealing with it, or they fold up their business and go out of business, and then you have restitution against the homeowner is a different matter to me. That's why I was a little confused, so.
Well, are we talking about restitution or deterrence?
I consider it
Sometimes
deterrent.
the fines against the contractor, we've talked about in the past, as a deterrent to make the contractor think twice before they violate a wetlands. So in that case, if you have a joint fine, it really isn't holding various people responsible. It's not specifically targeting an individual who's done something wrong. And restitution, restitution is for the wetlands. The wetlands is the damaged party here. So I don't understand the joint fine in that respect.
I would
Just a
consider it
question.
as a deterrent. That would be my
Just
understanding of
a
intent.
question. When you issue the fine, do you issue it to a party? So you could issue it only to the contractor?
The
And it's
hearing
when-
officer.
And it's when you issue it to both that the joint and several comes into effect. If you had only issued the fine to the contractor, then the homeowner would not be liable, correct?
I would think yes, but not being an attorney, I would defer to somebody who
Well,
is.
when you say you issue it, we're talking about an ordinance here, right?
Right, but somebody, we as the agency, authorize.
Imposes a fine.
Impose a fine upon an individual
Yes,
or a group,
that's the answer in my book.
an individual or a group. If it's a group, then it's joint and several. That is, if you issue the fine to more than one person.
Right.
Then it's joint and several. But if you only issue it to the contractor, it's not joint and several. It's his responsibility. Right? So I think what we have to do is pick the more guilty of the parties and fine them. I mean, to my mind, Brian raised an interesting example when he talked about a speeding ticket. If I'm in the car and my passenger is screaming at me to go faster, go faster, go faster, I'm the one who gets a speeding ticket. It's not joint and several. It's
But
an
if-
individual who gets it.
But if you're in a drag race and both of you are speeding, you challenge each other and you both take up the challenge, both of you get tickets.
Right. Then,
So to me, that's what violations, when you're talking about a homeowner and a contractor, somebody's not sitting in the passenger seat.
then we need an ordinance that says encouraging the destruction of wetlands is one fine and destroying a wetland is another fine. But we don't have that.
Do you have the ordinance by chance? Anybody have it?
I do not have it on me.
Okay, let's table it until we look at the ordinance.
Yeah, I'd agree. Okay.
Okay, then the annual operating.
To that, excuse me, would you
Yes.
be able to provide exactly what the hearing officer ruled?
Yes,
I feel kind of at sea because I don't have those things in front of me.
happy to do that.
Thank you.
The annual budget was circulated to the agency members. We have been given instructions to stay at 2%. So we are, certainly have some things that were up. Mostly contracted things, the salaries, of course, per usual, are the driving force behind the agency's budget, and by comparison, everything else is relatively small. We have finished digitizing most of our applications, so we are caught up from the period of time where we were doing several years at once. So we were able to reduce the $25,000 a year budget down to $16,800. So we were able to find some savings there. The others, while their percentage-wise seem significant, their dollar amount is actually fairly insignificant. So our overall budget ends up being $535,222 for a 2% increase. And that would be for Department 173. And we have our revenues. At this point in the year, we anticipate that we should end around $513,000. Some of that is professional guesswork because we really don't know what sort of applications are going to be coming in. So that's certainly a reasonable number, and that would be consistent with where we are budgeting for next year, which would be $518,000, so we're just about $20,000 off from what the requested budget is. So pretty close to neutral, and if we get some more applications in next year, or depending on how you want to handle the fines, we could make ourselves budget neutral.
Thank you, Pat. What is the timeline for approving the budget?
The budget does need to be approved this evening for it to go into the December mode. We meet too late in December
Okay.
to catch that in the next round. It was my understanding that this was circulated to the agency.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Just be sure we didn't miss that.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. Are there any questions on the budget? Would someone like to make a motion regarding the fiscal 2016-17 budget?
Make a motion to accept?
Okay. Is there a second? Second. Okay, all in favor? Okay, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that does it for me.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next up is compliance report. Doreen?
Okay, we had a total of 28 files reviewed for bond release this month. 12 of these files were either missing preconditions, or they had some field conditions that needed to be corrected or completed. 13, so we were able to release 16 bonds. 13 were initiated by homeowners or applicants. 15 were initiated by staff. For our inspections for the month, we had 96 compliance inspections, or total inspections. 73 were compliance. The remaining are doled out over drive-by inspections, public inquiries, and other. For deadlines passed, we had quite a few this month because of the plantings for the fall period. For the most part, all of them have been met. There were two. 147 Glenville Road had plantings that were required. They had a substantial amount of plantings, and during the inspection, they were continuing to plant. There was a small section that wasn't completed along Midwood Road that goes out towards Glenville Road. Staff will be following up with this. Potentially, you could see this on the December agency meeting if it's not completed. Similarly, 40 Sawmill Lane had plantings that needed to be completed by the 15th of November. They have not started any of the work on the property, but they didn't do the plantings by their deadline, so they'll be receiving notice from staff. Again, you might see this on the December agency meeting. We did the RBV program this past Friday, which was terrific. We had a great day for it. We did the sampling after the rain, so it made it difficult. A lot of the sampling sites we wanted to do were overflowing, but we did find a tributary stream that allowed us to do sampling. We don't really know until we get feedback from DEEP whether we found what we were looking for, but we think that we found at least 4 of the most wanted, which indicates a high-quality stream. So we'll let you know when we get any feedback from that. Also, I just wanted to mention, we plan to do another sampling on Monday, the 30th. If anybody's interested in joining us, we'd be happy to have you there.
Thank you, Doreen. You just leave from here, or do you post where you're meeting for the Monday's sampling?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Where do you meet for the Monday sampling?
I can send out an email. The sampling site, I guess we'll take a look at it and make sure that it's appropriate.
Okay.
But we can give you a time and a place.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. It is 7:31. We will start with our public session. Sorry.
I'm sorry, excuse me. We do need to adopt our 2016 schedule.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Next item is adopting the 2016 meeting schedule. Is there a motion on that?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Jim seconds, all in favor? All right. And the next item on the agenda is the revised fee schedule.
Yes, so this is discussion. I just wanted the agency to start this evening, and for regulation, we will, as you'll see it on the agenda, for action next month. The key items that I'd like the agency members to contemplate: previously, our land disturbance had no aerial component to it, so whether you were clearing 1/4 of an acre or 1 1/4 acres, the fee was just the same, and that did not seem to reflect the activity and the level of work taken to review such an application. Likewise, the next two were decks, chemical ponds, treatments, minor activities. It's just cleaning up the language, simplifying. Same with minor activities greater than 50 feet from a wetland or watercourse. That just is in recognition of small activities. The further away you get from the wetland or watercourse, the less likely you are to have an impact. And then you'll see the single asterisk. This just the language as previously written had it was subject to interpretation, which isn't always a great way to have these things written out. So this language just clarifies what staff collectively felt was the intent of the asterisk, is that there is a recognition that some disturbance comes with the project, and that fee is reflected in the basic additional fee. And then beyond that is when you start getting into building on that excessive fee. And then cleanly incorporating that the commercial properties are part of this additional fee structure too, which was not consistent with the old language. So you can chew on that, or I can
Okay.
certainly answer any questions the agency might have. And if not, we can pick it up in December.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the director tonight? No? Okay. I guess we'll take it up next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the public portion of our session tonight. We have 2 items on for the public hearing. The first is application 2015-148, 104 Houston Lane, SE Minor and Company Incorporated, for John and Catherine Robinson for the demolition of an existing home and construction of a new house 90 feet from wetlands with driveway, retaining walls, 20 feet from wetlands, and pool and tennis court septic over 100 feet from wetlands.
If you're ready, I'll introduce the list of documents for the record.
Please, thank you.
One completed application with supporting documentation dated October 7th, 2015, signed by agent Lawrence Lieberman of SE Minor. Lieberman, excuse me. 2, set of maps titled Proposed Site Development Plan on Property of Houston Lane LLC, consisting of SE1 Existing Conditions, SE2 Site Plan, SE3 Erosion Control Plan, SE4 Details and Notes, SE5 Septic Details and Notes, and SE6 LID Conceptual Plan, all dated October 6, 2015, all prepared by SE Minor, signed and sealed by Leonard Szczesny. I knew that was going to be tough for me. And then survey on property of Houston Lane LLC, also dated October 6, 2015, prepared by SE Minor, signed and sealed by Roy Carey, licensed land surveyor. 3, on-site soil investigation report dated April 8th, 2014, prepared by JMM Wetland Consulting Services, LLC, of Newtown, Connecticut, signed by James McManus, certified professional soil scientist. 4, project narrative, undated, prepared by SE Minor, unsigned. 5, drainage summary report dated October 6, 2015, prepared by SE Minor, signed and sealed by Charles Mills, P.E., and including Exhibit A, Operations and Maintenance Plan, dated October 6, 2015. 6, Department of Public Works Engineering Division request for review, dated October 27, 2015. 7, Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agency Staff Report, dated November 9, 2015, prepared by Patricia Sesto, Director, which I believe you all have a copy of, so I will not read that into the record. 8, Department of Public Works Engineering Division Site Development Review, dated November 17, 2015, prepared and signed by Scott Marucci, Senior Civil Engineer. And then last item, a legal notice for this evening's public hearing, published on November 11th and 18th. And if the chair wishes to take roll call of who saw the site?
Sure. Physically been on the site?
It's, considering that this is a public hearing, and in the event that the recording would need to be transcribed, if the members could respectfully state their name for the record.
Sorry, if you could, if members could state their names, starting with Mr. Fong. Welcome, Mr. Fong.
Hi, Stephen Fong.
Okay?
Jacob Schoendorf.
Norma Curlin.
James Carr.
Stefan Skouflis?
Brian Harris.
Elliot Benton.
Joe Rogers.
Bill Galvin.
I'm sorry, is it the, everybody went to the site who called
No.
out? Oh, that was just,
It's just
You
a roll
only want
call.
people who went to the site.
I only want, the record to reflect who went to the site.
Okay.
So the applicant
Starting
is...
again.
People who went to the site.
Yeah, we already said.
Just
Jacob Schoendorf.
Norma Curlin.
I went to the site, yes.
Bill Galvin.
Joe Rogers.
Thank you. Okay. This application is for a redevelopment of a parcel. There is presently a house that sits on this portion of the property. It is set cleanly at the top of the bank of a wetland and watercourse, mostly a watercourse with a fairly narrow band of wetlands associated with it. The redevelopment proposal adds a home, a larger home here, set substantially further back than the existing home. It includes a pool and a tennis court. The 100-foot review boundary sits approximately here, which puts a portion of the house, this parking court, and stormwater features within our regulated area. The parking court consumes partially the area that the existing house sits on, and then disturbs an additional area over here of ledge outcropping and a small number of mature trees. There is a rain garden proposed here at the eastern side of the site to pick up a portion of the existing driveway. The driveway crosses the watercourse, and there's an existing culvert which is not proposed to be replaced, just some work on the head walls. And then there is a rain garden proposed in this area adjacent to a existing stone wall. There is drainage that will be picked up approximately here, 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 and then discharged at the wetland boundary. And the tennis court is itself pervious. Let me refer to my staff comments. The application was missing a fair amount of material, which is highlighted in the staff report. Basically, there was an absence of information that spoke to the environmental components, the ecological statements assessing the watercourse on-site, as well as its relationship to the off-site portions of the much larger system it is part of. We have an absence of alternatives to work with associated with this project. And then there was information that was requested. This stream looks like it's in a fairly good health. It has considering the past development and the time this lot was developed in the history of 1950s, there is still a reasonable buffer adjacent to it on the east side, less so on the west side, although the lot as a whole has a fair amount of wooded area. The proposed development seeks to alter a full 80% of the lot, and so that certainly will change the overall character of the parcel, and that is something that I believe requires some attention and discussion this evening. Overall, it would seem to me that the applicant is looking at the existing site conditions, and instead of saying, okay, how can we do something better, the thought process seems to suggest this is the starting point, and where can we go from here in the direction of further diminishing the protective wetland buffers. Of the 1.59 acres of land alteration, nearly one of those acres is to be devoted to hardscape, which is substantial. Half of the parcel would be consumed by hardscape in one form or another. The stormwater management plan that's adopted by the town and principally Department of Public Works implements, there's a number of the criteria that are set forth by Department of Public Works in that manual that are excellent and germane to this agency. I did not feel that the applicant gave due consideration to sections 1.4 and 2.2, which really talk about minimizing the disturbance on properties, working with the land, its topography, recognizing its opportunities and its constraints. This plan does not seem to follow that call within that section of the Stormwater Quality Manual. Then there's some other technical comments that I have brought to light, and a strong request for alternatives. It is a requirement of the applicant to establish to the commission that there are no feasible and prudent alternatives with a lesser impact to the wetland or the watercourse. Those alternatives have not been brought forward. I also question the placement of the rain garden in this section. As I said earlier, the east side of the property, the buffer is in reasonably good shape. It has mature trees, there's some outcropping, some shrub understory, and it seems counterproductive to clear some of that vegetation away in order to manage stormwater to accommodate a acre's worth of hardscape. So that is something that I would look forward to seeing alternatives on. The time of concentration by having these 3 yard drains discharged directly to the wetland and watercourse, time of concentration is greatly shortened, and I've asked the applicant to also provide some discussion on the sources of water those drains will be picking up. A minor detail associated with the erosion sedimentation control plan that can be easily handled. And just going back to the point of that there's effectively no ecological evaluation associated with the property. This information has been conveyed to the applicant, and we did meet in order to more thoroughly discuss these points, and I'm looking forward to hearing what came of that discussion.
Thank you, Pat. Welcome.
Thank you.
With me tonight also is Attorney John Tessie, representing the applicant. The applicant is here, and members of our staff, Lauren Lockwood and Yobed Yaakov are here as well. We thank staff for the opportunity to meet and go over the project. There's some, obviously this is a new format, and we're fine with it. We'll meet whatever questions that are there. I will say that the project has been reviewed and approved by the Public Works Department for what we have. Well, obviously, it'll get re-reviewed whenever we make any potential changes. The applicant did meet. The applicant and I and the attorney has met with staff, and we did hear everything. We went through things, and we are in the process of making some revisions, and we are really here tonight to hear if there's any other concerns besides what's written in the staff report, so that this way then we can close the hearing at the next meeting, and hopefully close the hearing at the next meeting and move the project forward. Currently, the site is in the Greenwich Creek watershed, not the Brothers Brook watershed, and it is in the Greenwich Creek watershed, and it is in a GA water quality classification. The watercourse that is in question has multiple driveways that go over it to gain access. This is an area that was developed in town, as the director said, in the 1950s. Again, I'm here, as well as everybody else, to hear if there are any other issues that you may have. Currently, the site, the corner of the house is 20 feet from the wetlands. So what I did when I helped with the design of this project was to say, okay, let's move it back some more, and that's where we put the parking, or the wall for the parking court. There will be landscaping plans for restoration and enhancement, but we did that, and that's what I was using my dimension from, was the 20 feet for the wall there, so that this way, that's what it was historically, and we moved it back even further. I'm going to tell you that when we resubmit, it'll be even further back from that. Go ahead. It's still in design phase. It's everything. There's many moving parts, sir. How far back would you like it?
I like that asphalt drive at all. I mean, it's commendable to move the house back, but then you put an asphalt drive right on top of the wetland, or right
I would
adjacent
agree.
to it. I mean, there's no buffer, there's no, there's no remediation per se. There's no.
We heard that from staff, and we will be correcting that.
I think when you essentially raise a site like this, it almost becomes irrelevant where the previous lot lines were, or not lot lines, but the footprint of the building. So trying to sort of use that as a frame of reference, if we're not too far away from where we used to be, is irrelevant when you're disturbing the majority of the site.
Thank you, sir.
What's the construction detail for the driveway? It looks like it's going between two wetlands.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You have the driveway, it looks like it's going between two wetlands?
Yes.
Right. What's the construction detail where it goes between the wetlands?
We were just,
Raised, or is it ground level?
it was going to be a ground level, because all we were doing was adding some bumper walls, so to speak, and then repaving over what's existing there now.
Okay. So there's no water flow between those two wetlands?
Do I know what the water?
Is there water flow between the two wetlands?
Yes, there is. There's a pipe under there now.
Okay, so you'll just leave it as...
We weren't planning on doing anything to that at all.
The property is very topographically interesting. And what steps, if any, are you going to take to try to preserve that? The sense that I have is that a lot of these hills and trees and so are just going to be flattened. Is that how things are gonna-
There's a grading plan there, and I'm not saying that we were going to clear cut everything and flatten it and make it flat. There is some relief in there, and trying to get what the applicant wishes, as far as the pool and the tennis court and the house. Now that we're going down this road this way, we're going to have to obviously take everything into consideration and try to minimize and compensate.
It's a very beautiful property,
Thank you, we believe so too.
but it would be nice if it were to remain a beautiful property.
I'm sure that when it's completed, it'll be beautiful as well.
Larry, I didn't see any cut-fill analyses in what we have now. Did I just miss it, or haven't you done them yet?
That'll be added to the next submission. I think it may be on the bottom of one of the sheets. I'm not 100%
Could be.
sure, but I thought that it was done. I will double-check that with the project engineer.
Larry, perhaps you could take a moment and discuss how the plan is responsive to the drainage manual, those sections, sections 1.4 and 2.2.
Well, I'm going to say that I believe that it's consistent since Mr. Marucci approved the project, and he wouldn't have approved the project if it wasn't consistent with the drainage manual.
I
There are
beg to differ on
portions
that.
of the drainage manual that lend themselves to LID methodologies and lend themselves to other areas that Mr. Marucci doesn't, where you get credits for doing one thing or another. That hasn't really been quantified to an extent that it makes it easy for us to do it. So that's why we worked it through with we worked it through, and we've met with Mr. Marucci on multiple occasions. I think that I'd rather not go into a detailed discussion about points of the drainage manual until after the new revision, because the new revision, I know for a fact, one of the things that I know that we can do with this is that this rain garden that everybody's concerned about, and that the trees and the removal and the fill, that gets changed. We know that we can make it work where it doesn't involve any tree removal at all whatsoever, so it gets pushed closer to the road if necessary. And I also had the conversation with Mr. Marucci that said, if this is something that you all don't like, that he would accept us to do a direct discharge for surface runoff of these waters to infiltrate towards the wetlands. So if that's the case, I may be able to do it on the other side. It's still, that's why I'm saying it's still in flux after we had our meeting. So I would like to we will come back and we will answer everything as far as the drainage questions and so on and so forth. And it will be reviewed and approved by the town's drainage engineer, and ultimately by you all, because I'm sure that we'll be able to get a plan that you will think that will be appropriate and that will not impact the resources.
If I may, when Mr. Marucci reviews the plan, he's reviewing it for its engineering accuracy. He's not reviewing it to say whether it will have a wetland impact or not have a wetland impact. That's this agency's job. So while it is abundantly important to have Mr. Marucci's sign-off, it does not mean that this agency can sit back and go, okay, now we're done with that component. Two different things. Also of note, this rain garden here is there in order, you're not generating any new amount of runoff from this portion of the driveway. The inclusion of the rain garden is to make the overall calculation of drainage on the site work. So you could do away with that rain garden entirely, but you'd have to make up for it with less impervious coverage or some other means of infiltration elsewhere on the property.
Well,
So if I just,
Go ahead.
so when you say that, hey, Scott says if you want a direct discharge to the wetland, we can make that happen. That's not in a wholly accurate way of framing that response.
I stand corrected with my words. Okay, what I meant by that is that we can direct the flows over land so that this way then no tree removal will be required, and will let the natural polishing of the water, so to speak, happen without without having any impact or without having to design a engineered solution to make it work. I agree with you that Scott is, well, let's be perfectly honest, Scott is your engineer. That's who reviews the drainage issues for you guys, and he gives it its blessing. How it pertains and how we're making these, and how we have to go now and improve the water quality. The peak runoff for this project, as it is written, is less, as we propose, is less in the 150, 10, and 25-year storm. Okay, from what its existing condition is. That's an improvement. That's not an improvement for wetlands, it's an improvement for drainage. Okay, I understand what we're saying, that it's both related, okay, but there's a bar that gets set. And the drainage manual says this is what we have to do, and ultimately, we don't get a building permit unless Scott says, okay, go ahead and do it. We understand completely that we don't get a building permit unless Wetlands says so as well. This is now, we have to learn how to dovetail all of this together, and so that's what we're going to be doing. We will learn how it gets dovetailed together. Okay, but engineering, the hard and fast engineering, I mean, Mr. Marucci and the DPW are your engineers. They're the ones that are reviewing the projects, and they're the ones that are giving you, if they're not giving you advice as the way that drainage responds to wetlands, then as it works is then do we need a separate reviewer that is your engineer that does that?
Or I might add, how many times did you meet with Scott on this application?
4.
How many times did you meet with anyone in Wetlands on this application?
Twice.
Okay.
Twice. I get it. I get it. I get it. And this is a public hearing, and everybody has to put things on the record. So that's what I'm doing.
Very good. Any other agency or member comments?
I have a question. How many trees are you taking out?
We'll give you that number. I've already asked that of my staff to get that together. That's happening. We're doing those counts now.
Oh, you don't know?
I don't know. I will have that answer for the next time.
That's going to be, well, also, Mr. Benton, that's going to be a function of what the
Can you
revised
please
site
state
plan-
your name for the record,
John
please?
Tessie, I'm sorry, for the record, attorney for the applicant. That'll be a function of the revised site plan. Given the comments of the director and having met with the director, Mr. Liebman, we're aware of her issues. The idea here is to take a look at any application in light of the impact, or before this agency, that a development's going to have upon the wetlands. And we understand the difference between stormwater management when it comes to public works and what it means to this agency. So we took seriously all the comments, both verbalized this evening and in writing in the staff report. We think we're going to come in with a product that, at least from our perspective, is going to be going well toward the direction that we discussed in our meeting of last week. We'll get that plan. And the real question is, Larry, we're talking about the next meeting of the agency. What is it, like the 16th? 21st? Are we going to have enough time to get those plans in? Is there any specific date you'd like to see? Assessor, the plan submitted, revised plan submitted?
So that,
It'll be enough time to review?
that burden falls to you. So the sooner you can get it to me, the more likely I can get a timely response back to you. And if there's something that still needs to be addressed, you'll have time to do that. So
Sooner the
you,
better.
if you want to have the opportunity to potentially close at the next hearing, then sooner is better.
Right. I did want to explore one comment. You made it a couple of times that we were introducing 50% hardscape onto the property as part of this application. The hardscape is basically 22%. In fact, from a zoning standpoint, it cannot exceed 22%. And that's set out in in one of the submitted plans.
We might be using hardscape slightly differently.
We may be, that's why I wanted to get
I'm
it clarified.
patios, sidewalks, roofs, pool, tennis court, so
Yeah, we're
all of
pretty
those
much-
pieces.
Okay, we're pretty much talking the same language.
Yeah, I pulled my information from your reports, so I
Okay.
did not measure it on my own.
We'll get that clarified then, 'cause I had 22% down, but thank you.
One other question. Do we know how
Sure,
the
Mr.
groundwater flows on this site?
How it flows?
Directionally, yeah. Does it flow to or away from the wetland?
See what he's asking?
It goes to the wetland?
Yeah.
So every time you take down a tree, you have an impact on the groundwater, which has an impact on the wetland?
At least,
We'll respond to that accordingly.
Thank you.
it's all a question of degree, right?
In that regard, John, I think it's helpful,
Yes,
it's not
Mr.
just a
Galvin.
tree count, but there are many significant trees on that property, at least 12-inch plus. So those are the ones that really, I think, are critical, and there are a lot of them. So
Appreciate that.
the saplings, we don't care about, but the big
Okay.
ones, there are a lot of them.
Thank you.
I think it'd also be helpful to know
Later.
what level is the groundwater on this lot, and what the sort of proposed basement plan is going to be. How deep are we going, and is that going to impact groundwater flows, which I assume are all headed towards, subsurface flows, which I assume are all headed towards the stream. So the depth and size of the basement is of interest to me.
And Mr. Tessie, if, we spoke of it at the meeting last week, the information for where there was the existing yard drain in this area.
Right on the south side that we
Yeah,
talked
so
about.
where the pipe that services that drain feeds.
S.E. Minor's working on,
Perfect.
We're having a
We're
camera.
cer- he's conducting a search and not destroy mission, just search.
Very sure neighbors appreciate that.
Okay.
I have one other question. There is a ground drain right next to the wall adjoining the
same.
Beckman property, and it's cited on the plan, on the site plan page, as connecting to the existing 4-inch PVC pipe. Where did,
That's what she was,
That's the drain that the director was talking about.
that's what she was
is
referring
that the
to.
one that goes where?
We don't know. That's
We're
what
gonna
the
find
search
that
is
out.
about.
Because there was movement in that drain when we were there,
Mm-hmm.
water moving, so.
Yeah, but you picked up on the same point the director did.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other agency or staff questions or comments on this? Are there any members of the public that want to talk to this application at this time? No? Okay,
So we're formally requesting a continuance.
I'm sorry?
We're formally requesting a
Okay.
continuance of the
Okay.
application. Thank
Do we
you.
need a motion? We don't need a motion. Okay, we'll continue, application will be continued till next month. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is 2015-150, 2 Hunsinger Drive, SC Minor Incorporated, for Gregory and Chagas Sposito, for installation of plantings to restore disturbed wetlands.
Okay, I'm going to read into the record the list of documents for 2 Hunsinger Drive. 1, a stop work order letter dated August 12, 2015. 2, violation summary and cease and correct letter issued August 17, 2015. 3, municipal citation 2015-08 dated August 14, 2015. Cease and correct follow-up letter dated August 25, 2015. Citation repeal letter dated August 25, 2015. Greenwich Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agency minutes dated August 24, 2015. Completed application with supporting documentation dated October 14th, 2015, signed by Agent Lawrence Liebman of SC Minor and Company. Map entitled IWWA Restoration Plan and on property of Gregory Sposito and Shaka Sposito, 2 Huntsinger Drive, Greenwich, Connecticut. Prepared by SC Minor and Company, Inc., signed and sealed by Roy G. Carey, Connecticut license 15761, dated September 21st, 2015, revised October 13th, 2015. Soils mapping and wetland watercourse delineation report for 2 Huntsinger Drive, Greenwich, Connecticut 06831, dated October 14th, 2014, prepared by J. Fain of J. Fain and Associates, LLC. Project narrative is undated, prepared by SC Minor and Company. Department of Public Works Engineering Division request for review dated October 27th, 2015. Public hearing legal notice dated November 10th, 2015. IWWA staff report dated November 18th, 2015, prepared by Doreen Carol Andrews, Compliance Officer. Okay. The staff was alerted to a possible violation on site. The site inspection found that there was a significant clearing of the wetland. There were approximately 28 tree stumps ranging in size roughly from 3 to 8 inches in diameter, and an additional 13 tree stumps ranging from 9 to 18 inches in diameter in an area approximately 120 by 95 feet, so in this location here. This count didn't include any kind of small shrubs or herbaceous vegetation. The pond did support, at the time of the site inspection, quite a lot of pond life, a lot of frogs and other wildlife. The clearing opened up the canopy, which resulted in light penetrating down to the pond, increasing the heat to the pond. So it greatly affected and altered the character of the wetland. A cease and correct order 2015-18 was issued in August 2015. There has been an application submitted that proposes to remediate the area with native vegetation, trees, shrubs, herbaceous vegetation, as well as installing a demarcation feature. The planting plan has 55 trees, but 40 of these trees are detailed to go along the border of the property to create a barrier to Glenville Road. So these trees really don't count towards restoring this cleared wetland area. There were 15 trees and 65 shrubs and 500 ferns that were proposed to be installed within the wetland area. A good amount of them were located inside the pond. So staff wondered why this was proposed. There was a soils report, and the project narrative describes that the pond had been dried up and no longer was a pond. However, during the site inspection, the area did hold water. And site inspections following the initial site inspection, there was water in the pond each time. So the plantings that are proposed to go in the pond need to be pulled out and put into the buffer area. A demarcation has been proposed to go at the 35-foot setback, and it's a little bit closer here on the eastern side toward the driveway. Staff would like to ask the applicant what the rationale was for the configuration of the plantings on this plan. The location that was cleared isn't what was restored, and that needs to be discussed. Also, the area should be inspected periodically for the introduction of invasive species. If any invasive species occur, a management plan should be provided to be reviewed by staff, which may require additional application. Staff recommends that the agency discuss the configuration of the plantings and the location of the demarcation feature, the reasoning for this. There have been conditions of approval if the agency is happy with the feedback.
Thank you, Doreen. Welcome.
Good evening, Larry Liebman from SC Minor, representing the applicant. If you recall, when we did the show cause hearing, this was the site where the gentleman paid the contractor to go and get a wetlands permit and do everything, and then he went and clear cut everything and left with his money. The plantings that I did inside the pond, if you do notice, in the area of the pond, they are able to withstand periodic flooding. If we want to pull some out, that's perfectly fine. We are not proposing to do any grading at all whatsoever in the wetlands or in the buffer area, so that this way then if the water ponds and wetland plants get wet feet, it's okay. That's what they're supposed to do, in my opinion. If you'd like me to pull some of them out, that's okay. We are not proposing any work at all on the outlet structure or anything else. The proposed demarcation feature is placed because the driveway is there, and we want you to give them a couple of feet, that this way if something happens with the drive or for snow removal, so on and so forth. But it's going to be a boulder demarcation, that your typical boulder demarcation, and then as we were able to get away from the driveway, that's when I pulled it back even further. If there needs to be adjustment of plant material of size and species, the applicant is more than happy to do that as we move forward. He understood that there was going to be an order, and he understands that he has to do the plantings. So we would like to get this. We have no objection to anything that's written in the order as proposed by staff, and I am willing and able to answer any questions that one might have.
Prior to taking questions, the record should reflect that Norma Curlin, Joseph Rogers, Jay Schondorf, and Stephen Fong visited the site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess the first question for you, Mr. Liebman, is who actually did the planning plan? Did you yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You're not a landscape architect. You're many things, but not a landscape
No,
or
sir.
an arborist.
I am a
correct?
professional wetland scientist, though.
Okay.
So.
So there seems to be some question about these plantings within the pond and outside of the pond. And how can we get some reconciliation on that position? I mean, I'm not...
I think
can
we're
see
looking
s-
for the pond to remain as a pond, not be filled in with vegetation. So that material really should be along the sides if you want to keep it, but, in the center of the pond, I don't think.
The freeboard, if you look at the elevations, if you look at the freeboard from the dam to the center of the pond, to do that, it would probably, to make it more ecologically sound, it would probably be beneficial to excavate the pond area, so that this way then there's more space and more room for water to stack in there. That's one of the reasons why I put the plants in the pond, so this way then if the water does get stacked in there, the plants aren't going to die from having water in there. They'll still act as a function, and if I can move it out of the center where it is at its lowest point, or I can move it all out, and we can try to figure out how to do that. But I don't want to have I don't want you all to have, and us to have, and the applicant to have a green slimy mess in August when it's there, if there's plants in there and then there's water, they'll uptake the water, and it'll still function as a pond due to elevation. Like I said, no excavation. The only thing is going to be with a hand shovel to put the plants in the ground. But if staff feels that we should if staff feels that we should go and take the plants out of the pond, I don't think that would be a problem. I just think that the hydraulics of it would call for some excavation of the pond, because it's been filled in over the years.
Do we have any idea what was in the pond before the clearing?
If you recall, I was retained at this meeting when it was a show cause hearing. I did not see it until after all the damage was done.
Do the current owners happen to have any...
They just recently
pictures?
purchased the property. That's why they hired somebody to clean up the property.
Do the realtors who sold it to them have pictures?
I can ask.
If I may, by the looks of the basin, it does not look like it supported woody vegetation. I've seen it dry, I have seen it, when we were out the other day, it was holding several inches of water. Can I ask what the type of vegetation you selected, and what was your rationale in selecting those particular species?
The trees were that they can sustain.
Can you give me some species name?
Yeah.
Mr. Liebman, do you want to take the mic with you?
I can't read that. That's too pleasant. Okay, interior of the pond, there are some red maple and some eastern larches as far as the tree species. As far as the ferns, obviously the ferns are what they are, but they're larches and red maple, and red maple can take wet feet, and that's okay, and so can larches, by my experience. The edges also have some larches and spicebush, and spicebush also can take, spicebush occur in swamp or wet, flooded conditions. I don't think that there's anything in there. I mean, the winterberry as well. In the interior of the pond, there's some winterberry and some and red twig dogwoods. All of those species are specifically occur in red maple swamps.
Those plants, they grow up in a red maple swamp. So they have a hummock system that they're taking advantage of. They grow up with wet feet, so to speak. Frequently, there's a problem with nursery species. They are not grown in wetland-type conditions, let alone swampy, marshy conditions. So the shock to them generally is more than they can handle, and you don't have an inherent hummock system to promote that growth.
I would rather not change any of the species, the number of species, and everything that's in the pond will be either moved to the buffer area or to just the edge of the pond. And
I'm not saying that the idea of planting that, because it is, I can appreciate the sometimes there, sometimes not there water. I'm just not sure the species that you've selected. I would have expected to see something more like swamp azaleas or things that are truly swampy. Because the others, I just don't know, unless you're going to create some sort of hummock system that's going to raise them up a bit. And you're going to specify you have to go to a nursery that.
Again, species definition can be worked out with staff. If you want me to change the rhododendron viscosum to rhododendron maximum, which is swamp azalea, we can do that. I mean, as far as that's concerned, that I think is easier, and I don't have an objection in doing that. I thought that by doing this, I was trying to get some vegetation in there, get the shade back, because the shade was completely gone, and so this way, and kind of restore the habitat. But if we're concerned about the water, the standing water, then we can take all of those ferns and just put them, just don't change the number of units and just put them outside of the pond and put it in a buffer area. That's fine.
Can you speak to the dimension, Larry? Mr. Liebman spoke about the demarcation alongside the driveway, but I don't recall hearing the rationale as you moved south and west. What's 35 feet?
35 feet from the pond would put the demarcation feature in the existing driveway. I left 5 feet off of the existing driveway so that this way there was an area for a snow shelf, as well as if at any given point in time, the applicant was going to come in and do something, that there was some sort of latitude there. It was not unusual that this agency allowed driveways to be 25 feet and structures to be 35. And I understand that that's not the way that things are done now. However, I'm working with an existing situation there so that this way then we still have, it's more than 25, it's almost like 30, okay, and it just goes. To move it to 35, to go and get it into the driveway, I think would show an undue hardship to the applicant.
If I may repeat my question, I'm not concerned about the area alongside the driveway. My question pertains to this area down here, which, based on the aerial photos, had shrub, saplings, and is now being proposed to be converted to lawn. I'm not questioning the driveway, south and west.
Wow. I chose 35 feet because I thought that 35 feet was what the agency has required before in the past, and what the agency was required in the past on projects similar of this nature. If the agency would like a larger demarcation, or longer demarcation feature and buffer, then that I have to go back to the applicant with that, because I know that the applicant is currently working on plans to go in and to do a redevelopment of the site, and in doing that, that's going to, and well, I told him he had to go and clear this up and plant everything first, okay, and then a redevelopment project could come in. That could be, that's also was part of the driving force, Madam Director.
Okay, so there's no tangible reason tonight as it pertains to the record of this application. So effectively, you're asking to create more lawn than what was there before the violation.
We're not asking to create lawn, we're asking to do a...
If it was, the buffers don't consume the total area that was cleared. They consume less than what was cleared.
Right. I guess what I would like to see is a restoration plan that restores the buffer as it was prior to the violation. And if that means that there are more plantings that come down into that southwestern corner,
then we
should see
then I
that.
respectfully request that you continue this public hearing.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other agency questions? Is there public questions or comments on this? Then we shall continue this for next month. Thank you very much. Okay. That concludes the public hearing section of our evening. We're moving on to our regular agenda. First up is a Town of Greenwich project, 2015-158, Split Timber Place, Town of Greenwich Department Public Works for repairs to head walls and retaining walls associated with Split Timber Place, crossing over Cider Mill Brook.
All right, this is a very straightforward project. The reason it was brought to the agency is that there will be a little bit of work done in Cider Mill Brook. The retaining wall to the north, particularly northwest of the crossing, some of the boulders have fallen out of that wall. It's a low retaining wall, so that, you know, there will be some work in the brook to get those put back in place. The other thing would be the, just making sure that any debris that is collected and not allowed to enter the brook when repointing of the masonry is done, and repair of some concrete defects in the culvert are fixed. As is typical with projects that DPW contracts out, actual procedures for erosion control and things are sort of set in consultation with the contractor who's selected to do the project. So the most important condition that I'm recommending would be a pre-project site meeting with staff and the contractor to go over what their procedures are going to be so that we can give our input if we think that they could be beefed up a little bit. But as I said, this is a very straightforward project, and I recommend the agency issue a permit with the couple of conditions included in the staff report.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Welcome. Bob pretty much said it all. It's really just minor maintenance we're doing to the stream channel and the bridge to maintain our bridges rather than have to let them fall to complete disrepair and then have to rebuild them, so.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant from the agency or staff? No?
Could I just comment, Bob, is it fair to say that the next two projects are parallel and you have the same basic issue to raise, that you want to have a pre-meeting?
That's true. I mean, I think the Bedford Road project is a little more involved. It's a much bigger watercourse, and they're going to be putting, well, we're going to talk about it, and it's, so I wouldn't sort of try to mold them.
Take each one in turn.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Are there any public questions or comments on this application? Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
Okay, I think Bill got in there first. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Next up is 2015-159, 0 Bedford Road, Town of Greenwich, Department of Public Works for repairs to the Bedford Road Bridge over the Byram River. Bob?
Okay, yeah, as I just was mentioning, this is the Byram River. The flow through here is much more substantial than Cider Mill Brook, and it's also very variable. The project includes more work in the river. Let's see, that would be the northeastern wing wall has some undermining, and so they'll have to be putting about 5 cubic yards of riprap below this to fill the scour hole. The other thing about this site is that the banks of the river are pretty steep. So I'd like some information about how the riprap is going to be brought down to the river. There's some woody vegetation along the bank, and this should be protected during the work getting the riprap down to the river. Again, all these details, I mean, we could ask Mr. Michael for his input, but the contractor is going to be the one who's going to basically have their procedures that they'd like to do, so a pre-construction meeting will be very important. Debris collection, again, is important, and these things, you know, generally get worked out at those pre-construction meetings. So I'd recommend that the agency issue a permit. I did add a condition here, which is more important in this case than in the prior case, that work in the watercourse be done during low flow periods. I don't know that you could do it in the Byram River other than low flow, because it comes up pretty high. But I recommend the agency issue a permit with the conditions provided.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome again.
Thank you. Bob pretty much said everything. We have not specifically talked with the contractor on their means and methods on getting the materials in there yet. But as Bob mentioned, we do generally have a good relationship with staff, and the contractors do as well, to meet at the site prior to start of construction and work out the details on how we can comply.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant on this application, from the agency? Any further staff questions or comments? Yes, Bill?
Approximately when do you think you'll do the work?
The contractor we think we're going to be utilizing is pretty busy right now, so it may not be until next year, but we were hoping to get it in this year. Also depends on the weather.
Yeah, okay.
If we get a snowstorm next week, then we would probably not get it done this year.
But it's about a 2-week project? you
Probably,
guessed? Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any public questions or comments on this? No? We have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? It was Jim with the motion and Bill with the second, I believe. Joe. No, it's Joe and Jim. Change. Next up, application 2015-160, 160 South Water Street, Town of Greenwich Public Works for development of a pocket park adjacent to the Byram River.
All right, this application was approved as sort of as an agent approval. It wasn't removed from the agenda, but
Okay.
permit's been issued.
Okay, thank you. So noted. The next application is 2015-164, 0 King Street, Village of Rybrook, for KSB Arrowwood Realty Corporation for installation of drainage at Doral, Arrowwood, and along Anderson Hill Road.
Okay, leaving King Street, turning onto Anderson Hill Road, you go a short way up there and you hit the Connecticut-New York line. And there's a low spot in the road there that apparently is a ponding problem and a travel hazard that the Village of Rybrook would like to correct. The plan is to install a catch basin in the road in New York and then pipe into the golf course and basically replace an existing drain that's runs along the tees there and that discharge to a pond on the course. The piping, most of the piping will be done in Connecticut on a piece of property that the golf course owns that's undeveloped. And I understand that they'd like to get this work done before next golf season, and that it would take about 2 weeks to complete. As I note in the staff report, it was kind of, I wasn't quite sure where the water went, ultimately, but it turns out that that water goes through the course, a couple of ponds on the course, to a pond on at the southeast corner of the Rexon Office Park, and then goes under King Street to Shemin Nursery and down ultimately to the Byram River. So because this water is ending up in Greenwich, I do make the recommendation that Town of Greenwich standards be used in the catch basin. So rather than the 2-foot sump shown on the plans, Town of Greenwich standard is to have a 4-foot sump with a hood on the outlet pipe to keep floatables and some of the oil and stuff out of that water flowing from the catch basin. So, this is a low-impact project. They're going to use the same discharge point into the pond as exists right now. I do recommend the agency issue a permit, and I also want to point out, and as I did in the staff report, that we will be reviving an enforcement action that was sort of lost in the mists of time in the past against the golf course, because there was a project back in the 90s that they went beyond the approval that the agency granted at that time, and that file sort of resurfaced in my research on this project. So, but Rybrook didn't do it, and neither did our DPW, so I'd recommend the agency issue a permit for this drainage work.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the applicant here wish to?
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Chris Bradbury. I'm the village administrator for Rybrook. And also with me tonight is Michael Nowak, our superintendent of public works and engineering. So really, as it was described, this is really a ponding problem on Anderson Hill Road. We're trying to solve for both communities, really the residents in both our locations. I've been in Rybrook for 15 years. It's been there, I think, that entire time. So literally, we're just looking for a solution. We approached Doral Arrowwood. They were very open to, allowing us to have this easement, which Rybrook has agreed to install, and also will maintain it going forward. Of course, the pipe is in Greenwich, which is why we're here before you tonight, and the water goes into Greenwich. So really, we look at this as really a nice joint project for all of us. Doral Arrowwood doesn't benefit from this particular project at all. They're just doing it to be cooperative.
Okay, thank you. So you've read the staff report. You're in agreement with the recommendation for the 4-foot sump? And then has this been reviewed by your equivalent of inland wetlands in Rybrook?
We don't have such an agency.
Such
We
a
have a
shame.
consulting engineer, and our consulting engineer worked with us on the design, and we just are going to implement the
Okay,
project.
very good. Thank you. Are there any agency questions on this? Any public comments? Anyone from Rybrook here? No? Okay, may I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you very
Good luck.
much. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Okay, next up are consent approvals. Tonight we have 3. 2015-154, 142 Old Mill Road, SE Minor and Company, Inc. for Elise S. Clark for installation of a new septic system to replace failing system 90 feet from wetlands. 2015-147, 403 Stanwich Road, J. Bond Septic Services for Martin Mushkin for installation of a new septic system to replace a failing system. And finally, 2015-153, 407 Round Hill Road, Frangione Engineering LLC for Adam and Sarah Dolder for construction of a new family residence, driveway, swimming pool, and septic system 90 feet from wetlands. Are there any agency questions or comments on the 3 consent approvals?
If I may, 407 Round Hill Road, there was a consensus of the agency members in attendance at the site walk that should be moved forward as an agent approval, which it was.
Okay, so noted. So are there any questions on the first 2 consent approvals? Any public questions or comments on this? No? I have a motion. Any motion? Thank you, Jim. Second? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, on to pending applications. 2015-123, 160 Bedford Road, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors LLC for 160 Bedford Road LLC for construction of a new single-family residence. Bob?
All right, well, the agency's looked at this for 2 months prior, and most recently, the recommendation to delay was due to a couple of outstanding concerns the agency had. The first concern related to the location of the sport court. Can I have a pointer, please? All right, now this plan is not the current plan. Right now, this illustrates what the concern was, though. The sport court here, the other thing I'd note is it's upside down, so north is to the bottom of this. But the sport court was sited about 35 feet from wetlands to the east and wetlands to the south. Agency members asked if that could be reoriented or shifted in some way to get it further from those wetland areas. The revised plan we've gotten does do that. I'd note that the revised plan has a smaller house footprint and a smaller guest cottage footprint, but particularly the house footprint allowed this sport court to be slid to the north so that it maintains a 60-foot separating distance from the southern wetland, and the grading associated with the retaining wall here in the southeast corner is about 41 feet from the edge of the wetland to the east. So that's a response to the agency's concern about the location of the sport court. Second question was whether the restoration planting plan that had been provided was adequate to restore the wetland and buffer areas that had been cleared at some point between 2003 and 2008. Now we've gotten a revised planting plan. It greatly expands the width of the meadow buffer to the west of the house, basically bringing it all the way up to the bottom of the hill here. And I think there was also a little bit of an increase over here related to the relocated sport court. The other question that came up back in October was how this planting plan restores the functions and values of the wetland and buffer as they'd previously been, you know, a lot more woody vegetation than what's there now. Now, I passed out, or I emailed you a copy of a report that Mr. Kenny, the applicant's environmental consultant, submitted on November 20th regarding wetland buffer enhancement. And I'm not going to necessarily say everything in the report here, but basically what Mr. Kenny points out is that the clearing that was done on this property was not so much clearing as the result of a tornado that came through from Westchester County through northwestern Greenwich in July 2006. So he's making the point that this was not a done on purpose. I've already informed the agency this wasn't done, even if it had been done on purpose, it wasn't done by the current property owner because they just took possession of the property. Now, Mr. Kenny then goes on to say that between the trees that are proposed to be planted and the widened meadow buffer that's proposed, the functions and values of the wetland and buffer are still being met as far as water quality and habitat, provision of habitat. And I think I would go a step further than I believe he does in his report and say that, this meadow is actually creating a very it's creating a lot of edge on the property, which is a valuable habitat feature for wildlife diversity. So personally, I think that the applicant has addressed the concerns of the agency. I did provide conditions of approval in the staff report, and I would recommend that the agency issue a permit.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, Bill Kenny. We agree with the statements that Mr. Clausy has made and have no comments with regard to the proposed approval conditions.
Okay.
Be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on the agency have questions for Mr. Kenny regarding this application as it stands tonight?
Responded very well to our concerns.
I would agree. Are there any public questions or comments on this application? No? Would any staff, anything else to add? Nope, okay. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Bill seconds. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is application 2015-113, 723 Lake Avenue, J. Bond Septic Services for LLC for removal of fill and debris and installation of plantings to restore disturbed wetlands and buffer. Doreen.
Yes, there's an error on the staff report, so it's 723. Okay. Staff originally went out to this site to do an inspection for an emergency septic repair, and in the process of that inspection, observed that unauthorized clearing had occurred. Can I have a pointer, please? In two areas of wetlands on the property. The first one was in the eastern location below this retaining wall, and the second one was on the western portion of the property. There was also landscaping debris in various locations and a deer fence that had been installed that was not authorized. The fence has since been removed. The fence was located below the wall in this wetland area. There's no plans to replace it according to the applicant's agent. A planting plan has been provided for the eastern wetland and buffer area. The area that was cleared was approximately 140 by 50 feet, so right below this wall. They are proposing to restore the wetland area with 64 woody shrubs and 80 herbaceous plantings in an area that's roughly 65 by 20 feet. None of the planting sizes were provided on the plan. So any of the shrubs should be at least 3 to 4 feet in height, and any of the herbaceous vegetation should be at least 1 gallon in size. Comparing the 2003 aerial photos to the 2013 aerial photos, at least 1 tree was removed. So staff recommends implementing an additional 3 trees to further progress the restoration of that wetland area. The remaining area below those, the double stone walls, which may be difficult for you to tell, but these are stone retaining walls. This area down here is currently lawn, and so the area they're going to replant is right within this wetland right here. And with the trees, it should accelerate the restoration of that buffer area, and then the remaining area should remain to revegetate naturally. The second wetland is located at the front of the property. Looking at the aerial photos, in 2003, this whole area here was wooded, and as you progress through 2008 and 2013, the trees have been removed and lawn has advanced in this area and into the wetland area. A planting plan has been provided for this area as well. There's 45 shrubs and 13 herbaceous plants to restore just the southern finger of this wetland. In addition to this planting plan, staff recommends an additional 10 to 12 trees be planted to restore the buffer around that wetland area. It also may be beneficial to have a demarcation feature. This particular plan doesn't show it, but there's an outcropping. At the southern point of that outcropping to the western property line, a demarcation feature be installed and this area be allowed to revert in addition to the plantings that are proposed and the 10 to 12 trees that staff recommends implementing. Any landscaping debris should be removed, and staff recommends that the agency set a tight deadline for the removal of that debris and the installation of the plantings. Staff recommends issuing an order with the conditions that are provided.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. Is there anyone from the applicant here tonight? No? Question for staff then, is there, is there a feeling that the retaining wall was a demarcation feature at one point? To the north of the property?
It very likely could have been, I don't know for sure. There are new property owners here, though. They purchased this property within this year.
Okay.
My feeling is, yes, that was a demarcation feature. Because when they built the pool, I don't know whether the list of prior permits lists when the pool was built.
2000.
Yeah, that's when the wall was built, and that's where,
Right.
that was the edge.
Okay. So we should really be looking, I mean, I guess in my mind, we should be looking at the restoration going up to the base of that wall then, if that's the case.
Yes.
Establishing the buffer.
Yeah.
During the clearing in the front yard, so the application is proposing to revegetate just that finger of wetland and not with any substantial measure of the buffer of the prior to, or within that 2008, 2013 window?
Right, that's correct.
And there was no information in the application that provided justification or the rationale for that planting?
It was pretty slim in details, and so no, there was nothing provided like that.
Okay. I guess I'd be in favor of definitely establishing a demarcation feature in that southern part of as well.
Did the applicant have they been in touch with you, or?
You know, I provided email to let them know of the staff report and the requirements of the additional plantings, which is substantial, and I have not heard any feedback.
Okay.
So just a question for you. On the staff report, it has the applicant as J. Bond for Rebecca Collin. This is EL LLC. There's paperwork which says Rebecca Collin and then EL LLC, care of Collin Development LLC. So to whom does the order to correct go?
So this property actually is strange in the way that it's divided, but the same property owner owns multiple parcels, and so there's a property line that goes right across the front. And I believe there's a little section here, too, so it's divided into 1, 2, 3 parcels. They're all owned by the same property owner, which is unusual, but it's the same property owner, which we issued this cease and correct to.
Okay.
The property owner is ELEL, right?
The assessor listed as ELEL LLC.
Any other agency questions? Public questions or comments on this? I'll make a motion to maintain, or I guess motion to delay for this one, correct? Is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So moved. Next item is 2015-149, 11 Langhorne Lane, S.E. Minor and Company Incorporated for Langhorne Partners LLC for installation of plantings to restore a disturbed wetland and buffer and construction of patio and retaining walls 40 feet from wetlands. This one is yours, Pat.
Okay, so this property comes to us. It is also a violation. I believe it was Doreen who was out at the site and during an inspection and noted that the patio area here in this area was under construction. If I recall correctly, Doreen, there was an existing patio that was taken out, and this is then.
I think it was grass before.
Okay, grass before, my mistake. So the notice of violation went out for the construction of the patio, but coincident with that, there was also clearing in this area that included this finger of wetland here, as well as the rock outcroppings that surrounded it. This feature here was the limit of lawn demarcation for the house when it received its permit. Given the time in the growing season, so to separate this out, there's really sort of two issues before the agency. One, the revegetation of the wrongfully cleared areas, and then second, the whether to permit or not permit the construction of the expanded or the new patio area. The plantings were installed. Given the point in the growing season, the applicant, at their own risk, went ahead and did some planting to get that in for this fall season. I should note the members who have been out to the site, where's my list? Stephen Skofilos, Norma Curlin, Joseph Rogers, Bill Galvin, Jay Shondorf, and Stephen Fong were all out to see the site. So I'll allow those members to comment on the plantings as they interpreted them. And then the patio area comes literally right up to this demarcation feature, but consists of flagstone with grass in between. There's planting beds to the interior of this rather large patio area, so it's not just pavers or concrete or anything end-to-end. There is diversity in the ground cover type. Overall, I think we've got just some points to discuss this evening, but provided we can receive satisfactory responses to those, I would recommend approval of the application with the special conditions and normal conditions provided in the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Welcome.
Good evening, Larry Liebman, representing the applicant. Also, a representative from Glengate is here with me with regard to the two planting plans. The number one correction, the first planting plan is superseded by the second planting plan. I know it wasn't said so when it was submitted, but it's superseded. So the restoration buffer remediation plan is the only plan that we should be looking at. The violation was just what was said, that there was they went out there, everybody saw what they did, but the plantings have been installed, so I think that is, I think that was on the applicant and the contractor's merit that they went and they got that done in the time frame, so that this way then the plants can start going through the season. The the boulder demarcation has been installed, so this way then there's no question. The shallow to ledge issue is that, well, they put temporary top irrigation in, so we can keep that going until the plants harden and everything is taken care of. The mulch is called for on the plans to assist in short-term stabilization, and then everything inside the 50-foot buffers, inside the 50-foot is going to naturalize. And if if it's invasive species, we'll monitor that and we'll pull them out before they take hold. But I don't even anticipate invasive species going and growing in over the rock. And then with the final question is that what we did was all of the work for the patio, all of the material, all of the soil, all of the construction fences, all of everything was removed from the site, and the site has been seeded and hayed until you guys say it's okay, and then they'll go back and build the patios. So there was, and as the director said, the patio is going to be on grass joints, on soil, and not with a concrete pad. So we think that this was going to be okay, and that the area of wetlands is still going to be protected. And we have no objections to anything that's written in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agency questions for Mr. Liebman regarding this application? No? Are there any public questions or comments on this? Would someone like to make a motion?
Motion approved.
Jim approve. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Jay seconds. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Next up is application 2015-151, 28 Powell Street, 30 William Street LLC for construction of a new single-family residence driveway, walkway, and drainage 45 feet from Byram River.
Okay, the agency did authorize the redevelopment of this property back in 2006. At that time, what was the hazardous house was removed from the site, but the new house that had been approved was not built before the permit expired. So the same owner has come back with a new application, new house footprint, new location further from the river. The prior house was set about 12 feet closer to the river. It was a bigger house. The other thing that's changed on this plan is that they're complying with the current drainage manual, which is a lot more stringent than what was in effect in 2006. So they've got a driveway with permeable pavement that's connected with under drain to an infiltration system in front of the house, and then a high overflow from all of this stuff will end up in the catch basin in the road and, make its way to the river. DPW Engineering Division has some actually fairly minor issues with the drainage system, more or less details that they want adjusted in the drainage report and map of the watersheds and things like that. The bigger issue had to do with the plans indicating or suggesting that there might be some fill placed in the floodplain here. And so I did give you the DPW comments, and the comments under bullet point 5 are the important ones from our point of view. I have subsequently spoken with Mr. Marucci. He doesn't really think that there's any, sort of issue that is noted under bullet point 5 that can't be worked out with the applicant and their engineer. He has been, and I would note that since the report was written on November 17th, this applicant has been, and their engineer have been very busy addressing the comments made by Mr. Marucci. And let's see, this would have been last Friday, they submitted a point-by-point response to all of the issues listed in Mr. Marucci's comments, including bullet point 5, provided a topographic survey and some other information that was not readily available when Mr. Marucci made his first review of this. So I think this is one of those cases where I would kind of go out on a limb and say, with the condition that prior to any work on site, DPW indicate that they're satisfied with those points, that we might be able to move ahead with this application tonight. I did prepare conditions of approval if you want to do that. And I guess the only other thing I would mention, and maybe the applicant can speak to this, is there are 2 yard drains shown on the plan through which the overflow of the infiltration system run. But those drains, at least the detail shows that they would have open grates at grade, and the questions come up, well, that could provide a direct discharge to the river for any lawn chemicals or something that would be used on this property. So perhaps the applicant could consider modifying this somehow so that either there's no direct connection between the yard and the river. That's just something to consider, an alternate design, but I think overall, this is an approvable project, and if the agency wishes to do so, I would support issuing a permit for this.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Is there anyone from the applicant here? Please.
Hi, good evening. I'm George Flutie. I'm the owner of this property, and I'm not technically qualified to comment, but I can assure you that we will work, our engineers will work closely with the town to comply with all the requirements.
Okay. I guess the most significant question is regarding the discharge on that,
Right.
that one thing.
I cannot personally explain it myself. I wasn't even aware of it.
Okay.
But I can assure you, we would not do anything that would upset the town in that regard.
So you're amenable to coming back with a modified design?
Totally, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Are there any questions, further questions from the agency on this? Any public questions or comments? Would someone like to make a motion on this application? Or else I can take a shot? Okay. Motion to approve with the condition that DPW review any outstanding information that the applicants provide, and that the applicant works with staff on options for a revised drainage system to remove the direct discharge to the Byram River.
I would just make it,
Okay.
with regard to drainage summary 5, that they
Okay.
comply with it.
Okay.
As opposed to anything these.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I just modify that before we move on? Condition to satisfying condition number 5, the drainage summary report is acceptable in concept, but the following revisions and additional information must be submitted. Items A, subpoint 1 and 2. Okay. Do you still second, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is application 2015-152, 31 Harcum Road, Andrew A. Jaffe and Lena Slotnick for installation of plantings to restore a disturbed wetland and buffer. Doreen?
Okay. Staff conducted a site inspection following the submission of a green sheet for some site activity and found that an area had been cleared along an entire slope. It's about approximately 135 feet by 195 feet down to the Byram River. Can I have the... Okay, so this area, below a retaining wall here, a stone wall, down this area has been cleared of vegetation and grass had been implemented. Staff counted approximately 25 stumps that ranged in size from about 4 to 12 inches in diameter along the entire slope. The tree canopy is intact, and there are erosion controls along the base of the property, which is the Byram River. Cease and correct order 2015-24 was issued in September 2015, and the homeowners have been very responsive to staff. An application has been submitted that proposes to remediate the slope or a portion of the slope by installing a variety of 113 native shrubs along the bank of the river. And then the remaining area will be sown with a no-mow fescue planting mix. Also proposed is 120 Pennsylvania sedge that would be installed to the 35-foot setback, and then an additional 100 sedge would be installed within the 100-foot buffer. There's a sewer easement located about halfway up the slope. At this location on the let's see, I think this is the southern side. It's about 65 feet down to the Byram River. There is a small fringe of wetland along the river. And then as you continue northward, it gets larger. It's about 110 feet from the Byram River. So the plantings that were proposed will help to stabilize the slope. The canopy, as I mentioned before, is still intact, so the area is very shaded. And so that restoring any area down below here would require shade-tolerant plantings. Staff recommends to see at least a minimal additional plantings installed, either 20 native shrubs or 10 native trees installed within this area below the easement to increase that upland buffer area. A demarcation feature might also be prudent to put along this area to further protect the wetland and the buffer area. Also, the property should be inspected over time to make sure that no invasive plants become established. If we do see some invasive plants, a management plan should be reviewed with staff and may require that an additional application be submitted. Any native shrubs or vegetation that starts to regrow within that buffer area should be allowed to revegetate and naturalize the area. Otherwise, staff recommends the agency issue an order with the conditions that are provided.
Okay. Thank you, Doreen. Is there anyone from the applicants here?
We should also note that Norma Curlin, Joseph Rogers, Jay Shondoff, and Stephen Fong attended the site meeting.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lina Zlatnik, and I'm an applicant for 31 Harkim Road. First, I would like to thank the agency, especially Doreen, for helping, supporting, and being very patient with us during this process. We don't have any objections to what was written on the staff report except one issue. The issue is a requirement for the cash performance bond. We respectfully ask the committee to remove this requirement. It is financially not feasible for us to complete the restoration and fund the bond. From day one, we follow all agency instruction and recommendation and never miss deadline, and we will continue to follow the agency guidelines in the future. And I believe that the goal for us and for the agency is to fully complete restoration plan. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Question: one of the requirements was the additional trees that were listed.
Are we going? As I understood, we have
working out the
choice
details with
20 shrubs or 10 trees. We will continue to work, and we will decide with agency what is the best for us.
Okay.
We will do it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant on this?
Yes, I'm not familiar with the plan, but is there any deer protection proposed?
Yes. As per Doreen recommendation, we are going to do
A spray.
Spray like as often as we need, especially during first couple months, as I understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I will learn more about it. Right now, I'm not very, I'm learning. Right now, I know everything about shrubs, sedges, and I just reading book, and even I have some problem with my language, but I still trying my best with Doreen's support.
Because one of the purposes of the performance bond is in case those plants do fail, because they don't get sprayed off enough and the deer come in and eat them and they haven't been established after a certain.
I cannot make decision for you, but I promise to spray as often as possible.
Well, I think my recommendation, if the agency is okay with it, my recommendation would be if spraying is not adequate, you consider installing fencing around groupings of shrubs or something to keep the deer away from the shrubs. I mean, the last thing that the agency wants is for the restoration planting to fail.
Because then you'll have to do it over again.
So,
With them.
if you, take the measures that are needed to protect the plants, please.
But as of now, I don't understand exactly how to do fencing because we have like 113 and I understand additional 20. We're going to have 130 shrubs and it's going to be all over around. I don't understand how to do this fencing. If it will cover like a lot of area, it's like probably it will be.
It's a mesh, it's like a netting, kind of, it's not like fencing that you may be thinking about. It's more deer fencing, which is just a net, almost, on tall posts, so the deer can't get to the shrubs. I don't know if you've seen it
No.
on other properties
Honestly,
before.
no,
But
but-
it's not like a fence you'd see around a pool. It's very different,
Not a chain link fence.
and it's much less expensive than what you're probably envisioning.
We will do the best and we will try like probably both ways, like whatever is better for us, but we definitely will protect our investment from deers.
Right.
Because we're going to spend a lot of money for this restoration and we definitely don't want deers to destroy it. It's
Right.
our best interest.
Right. Thank you. Agency thoughts on the bond question? How much is the bond that we're stating on this?
So it depends on the price of the installed plantings, the plantings in the install price.
Ballpark?
I wouldn't be able to provide that, no.
How many shrubs are there total?
Well, there's 113, so I think 133 additional. I don't know if they're going to do the shrubs or the trees.
So if you figured
Yes.
roughly $50 a shrub, something in that range.
Well, I'm assuming that there's really not any planting that's going to be going on from this point forward. So is there any issue with delaying this a month until we have more information as to what the bond is that we're looking at? Agency thoughts on that?
You start setting precedents.
Right. Problem is, it becomes
Is it?
punitive.
What's that?
When you have, if you have a planning plan, that's worth $6,500, and you've got to put up another $6,500 for 2 years, you're now up to $13,000.
Right.
And that's,
It's real money.
it's real money. It becomes punitive at some point.
Well, all of these are structured the same way, our
Yeah, I
bonds
know.
now. And I have a problem with that.
The flip side of that is this is a violation.
I understand.
Right.
I haven't heard anything particularly compelling other than a request not to have a bond. It seems a little arbitrary to
The way,
single out a single request without
true.
a very compelling reason for it. I get we're still trying to sort out the amount of the bond, but, to blanket say no bond is necessary seems
Right.
not correct in this instance to me.
Perhaps since we're not in the planting season right now, if the applicant wanted to propose a payment plan for the bond, rather than having to come up with all of it at once?
I'm amenable to that. I don't have an issue with that.
I would agree. Do we still want to see a revised planting plan at this point? Or I'm happy leaving that to be worked out with staff.
I think that
And
we
I-
could do that on a staff level.
And then perhaps you can also educate the owners with regards to deer fencing and put them in touch with some providers of that, because that may make it even more likely that these things will survive. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to that? Or did I
Motion to
just do-
approve motion to approve the request for the issuance of an order with the conditions provided.
And also to work out a payment schedule for,
Well, if that's one of the, it's not a current condition, but if that's something that benefits or facilitates the burden, then sure. I don't have an issue with that.
but the bond requirement stays.
So how would they implement that payment plan? Is that what?
Something that staff would have to figure out.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's,
Yeah. I think that's fair, and it's actually a good idea.
Is that-
Okay, I'll second that motion.
Is that a precedent, though? Going to give extended payment terms on all bonds?
No,
How do you?
we don't go by precedence here.
no, I think it's a good one-off.
You like it as a one-off?
Yep.
Okay, good luck.
Okay. I seconded. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. What was that? That was Dartmouth. Next application is 2015-156, 12 Parsonage Lane, SE Minor and Company for David and Kristen Odi, for construction of a tennis court 35 feet from wetlands. Oh, did we skip one?
Okay, if you want to take Parsonage
sorry.
first, we
No,
could do
that's
that.
okay. That's okay, I can restate that, unless, is it both of yours? It's both of yours, okay. Well, let's just take it out of order then, let's do, can you do that, Bob?
Dartmouth.
Okay, forget it, we'll go back. Next
Dartmouth,
application is 2015-155, 8 Dartmouth Road, SE Minor and Company, Inc., for Bradley and Dana Gordon for construction of a pool and patio 55 feet from wetlands.
Okay, this property is, this thing doesn't work. Oh, here we go. It's kind of a funny site. It's on Dartmouth Road, but it's at a corner with Cat Rock and Commando. And the wetland is a wetland watercourse corridor that flows to the south along Cat Rock Road. The house is situated in the middle of the lot. Behind the house, the topography slopes down fairly steeply over rock outcroppings and things. And they've got a sort of a naturalistic pool that was built into the existing rock outcroppings, it looks like, which that pool is, very hazardous at this point, so they want to replace the pool with a new pool. This time, do the pool with a proper retaining wall along the west side. And my main concern about this project had been how, not knowing how they were going to build this wall. And just recently, their structural engineer has been in touch with me and said that this is going to be a poured concrete wall that will likely be pinned into the bedrock, so that will reduce the amount of excavation and sort of footings that will need to be created below the wall, which is very important because this is quite a steep slope down to the wetland from this location where the wall is going to go. The other thing that the structural engineer says is the wall is going to go in as the first step of the whole project, which will be a very great protective feature for the wetland during the rest of the project, which, along with the new pool, includes a small addition off the back of the house and some patio and deck work behind the house. The plan is shown, proposed a meadow here below the new development to serve as a mitigation feature for the small 225 square foot increase in impervious coverage that would result from the project. I didn't care for this as an idea because this is currently wooded, and the applicant's engineer is fine with that. They can come up with a different solution for this small increase, which may involve reducing the area of driveway, which would eliminate the increase, which would eliminate the need to do any kind of drainage mitigation. I had some comments on erosion controls. They're stated in the staff report. And the other thing that the director pointed out to me as I was finishing up this report is on the GIS, it looks like there may be a small encroachment of the neighbor's lawn into the wetland and, well, maybe the wetland buffer, I guess, right around here. I put a condition of approval in that if that is the case, that a demarcation feature be put along the property line and that the area of lawn encroaching be allowed to revert to a natural state. So I think this is a, pretty straightforward project now that all the details are in hand, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Hi, Lauren Lockwood from SE Minor on behalf of the applicant. We agree to all of the conditions listed in the staff report, and our engineer is exploring an alternative to that meadow buffer near the wetland.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agency questions for Ms. Lockwood regarding this application? Are there any public questions or comments on this? Okay, would someone like to make a motion? Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
There's Elliot. All in favor? All right. Thank you. Okay. Okay, now on to 2015 Parsonage Lane, SE Minor and Company, Inc., for David and Kristen Odie for construction of a tennis court 35 feet from wetlands.
All right, the wetlands on this property are scrub shrub wetlands up in the northwest corner. The area where this tennis court is proposed is a gently sloping lawn that has historically been maintained as lawn, according to the agency's records. This court and the rain garden that would handle the drainage from the court will not require the removal of any trees or anything. There are a couple of trees along closer to the property line, but I don't think they're going to be affected by the fill. The original plan, which is shown here on the overhead, had the drainage overflow going toward the neighbor's property, and there has been a revised plan submitted, which you should have gotten in your packets. It has shifted the rain garden to the north and runs the high overflow toward the on-site wetland, which will greatly benefit both of these wetland pockets. The DPW has looked at this design and found it to be acceptable. The other thing I noted when I went on the property, there's a chain link fence that runs through both of the wetlands. The revised plan shows this fence relocated outside the wetlands, and my recommendation is that we get a planting plan to be reviewed by staff to get some shrubs in this patch of lawn between the wetlands, and then allow everything else to revert to a natural state. But again, this is another application where the original submission raised some questions, but now that the details are in, I think this is, again, pretty straightforward, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
If I may, same attendees, same 6 attendees also went to this site.
Thank you. just one second.
Sure.
Bob, did you, you see any need for a demarcation feature in that corner of the property?
I think the fence is going to be a demarcation feature
Okay, so
when
that's
they
being
move it.
pulled. That's being pulled to the east of both of those wetlands?
Yeah, it's going to go right around here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome.
Hi, Lauren Lockwood from SE Minor on behalf of the applicant. We agree to all of the conditions listed in the staff report, and we will also explore the idea of planting native shrubs in that turf area to kind of bring it more to a natural state.
Do I recall that there was like some damaged fencing in the wetland in this one?
No, the fencing goes right up to the shrubs that are there.
And there wasn't anything in the center there? I kind of spotted something, but I don't. Did you see that? I don't.
What did you see?
It looked like damaged wire or fencing.
Well, I mean, the fence that's there goes through the wetland in the spots where it's.
Yeah, I recall that.
This is all lawn that's. Yeah, I mean, we could go in and check if there's like a chicken coop or something in there.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. Any agency questions for Ms. Lockwood? No? Any public questions or comments on this application? May I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, Jim seconds, all in favor? Okay, thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too, Larry. Okay. Next up is 2015-157, 38 Hidden Brook Road, Frangione Engineering LLC for Leo Biagini for construction of a driveway and a garage 10 feet from wetlands, residential addition, and terrace.
We'll start by saying that the site walk included this parcel as well, so the same 6 members did have the opportunity to visit. This property was before the agency earlier this year as a 2-lot subdivision, which was eventually approved by the Wetlands Agency, but did not succeed in getting a subdivision approval from Planning and Zoning, which I believe Mr. Frangione will correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's the way it went. So this application is now, this property is now back to redevelop portions of the property as a whole, and those consist of, in addition, let me start, this is the existing driveway, existing garage. The plan is to redevelop this area into living space, remove the driveway, relocate the driveway to this east side of the parcel, and construct a new garage at the end of that driveway. There is a head wall and a watercourse that continues away from the property boundary. It is small, maybe 2-3 feet wide. It's shallow, maybe a foot or so deep, and lined with small rocks. And there's lawn entirely up to the side of the little watercourse. As indicated by the report submitted by the applicant, the watercourse is fed by road drainage and then flows coming overland from properties to the north, which led us to question, or not question, but perhaps understand why it's called a hidden brook. So the origins, other than those overland flows, are unknown. The biological evaluations had not been provided originally, so the staff comments that were delivered to you folks last week had requested a number of pieces of information, namely additional information about this watercourse, where does it go, what sort of larger system is it part of. That information has been provided, and part of what was on the counter in front of you when you came in this evening, there's indications that this meets up with other similar watercourses and then winds its way down to Greenwich Cove. If I recall correctly, there is a pond that this little watercourse and others feed before it gets to Greenwich Cove, but I, for the life of me, could not find something that named that pond.
Yes,
But this does have a direct,
It's the one off of Willamere, right?
Yeah, it's Willamere Pond.
Willamere Pond?
believe
Thank
so.
you. See, I didn't check with you. That was my mistake. So it does have discharge to a freshwater system prior to getting into Greenwich Cove. Let's see, the other drainage components. The new drainage will consist of, this will be pervious pavement with a gravel reservoir underneath. The back lip of the turnaround or the back around will serve as a level spreader, so flows will come up and then evenly distribute off of that eastern edge and then make their way down to the watercourse. There is drainage that already discharges to the stormwater system in Hidden Brook, and the plan is to continue to drain directly to that stormwater system, which is something, a question I raised to Mr. Frangione. Is there an opportunity to do better? Because effectively, this is just a straight discharge with no opportunity for renovation, and I believe Mr. Frangione will speak to that. I did request additional information with regards to stormwater features, and I fully recognize that the drainage manual has language in it gets filed on the land records that talks in technical terms about what the various components of stormwater management would be on this parcel as well as all parcels. And it's been my experience that lay people, regular old homeowners, generally don't understand what those reports are talking about. So that it has been helpful to have a supplemental document that is much more direct and elementary in what is being spoken of. And in the supplemental staff report, item 5 gives an example of that. A level spreader, not in this case, but generically speaking, is, an elongated swale, and this is what it's supposed to do. Don't put the yard debris in it. Make sure, naturally occurring stuff gets cleaned out. People who have pervious pavement, we have unfortunately heard stories of people who, as part of their driveway maintenance, will have it sealed, just keep it up and functional. Hydrodynamic separators, this is just speaking Greek to people. So even the concept that your driveway has to be vacuumed, who do you call? What type of professional do you call to have your driveway vacuumed? So these things, which we get kind of used to hearing and understand what they are, most homeowners don't really have a handle on the features, even when they are pretty simple. So I think that they would benefit, homeowners would benefit from having that information geared towards their needs rather than just simply meeting the technical merits of the drainage plan. Let's see, and then just environmentally friendly lawn care just helps people understand that the decisions they're making on their lawn do have a direct impact to our freshwater systems and beyond. And I would request that the applicant in the future, there were things that my first staff report requested, and instead of working towards trying to devise a solution, the unfortunate response was, well, that conflicts with the drainage report, or that conflicts with something else, and to do nothing further. And I don't find that to be acceptable, and more than happy to work on figuring out what an appropriate solution could be. So I believe that the plan, we still need to discuss the direct discharge to the watercourse, but other than that, I feel that the plan is at a state where it can be approved with the special conditions outlined if that meets with the agency's liking.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Rob Frangione for the owner. With regards to the front of the house, I've spoken with the owner. What we'll do is disconnect the roof leaders from the front of the house, take them out of the roof leader drain that connects into the catch basin, and let them discharge onto splash blocks in the front yard. This way there'll be some overland flow prior to getting it into the catch basin, and that'll provide for some temperature abatement. With regards to the the maintenance declaration, unfortunately, I'm put in a position where the engineering department says, this is the standard language we have to have for the maintenance agreements and stuff like that, and I can't modify it. Same thing, and I'd welcome the opportunity to work with staff on some sort of standard language as like a homeowner's guide or something.
Exactly.
That would be great if we could use it for future applications, but the problem is I'm stuck between two agencies.
It's not stuck between, it's adding more.
Okay.
So as an applicant, we don't stick you in between. It's your responsibility to make everybody happy simultaneously. And if that requires you to think beyond the one department, then I would encourage you to do so. And if you feel that you're stuck between two departments, I encourage you to give me a call and say, I'm feeling stuck, I'm not sure where I can go with this. Because it's
I would
hard.
say in particular with these, pervious asphalt paving, it's going to help you with
Well, the downspouts for the garage and everything go to a level spreader underneath it, so there is going to be renovation of the runoff from a portion of the house. If there was enough hydrostatic pressure underneath, theoretically, the blinding would kind of get pushed out from all the water that's going through it. But otherwise, what will happen is the water will go over the curb on the east side, over the lawn, and then out to the drainage ditch. So there will still be some overland flow component to it in the worst-case scenario.
Yeah, I remember when this came through for subdivision, we were talking about a shared driveway between the two properties and whatnot, so I see where you're going with it. And, my feeling is with the pervious pavement, I think it's a great test case for us to see how it.
And the ones that I've seen installed so far, they work great. And the homeowners love them because if you plow them just a little bit in the winter, you're always going to have a little bit of snow left. When the sun comes out and starts to melt the snow, the water goes straight down, and it doesn't ice up in the winter. So the clients that I've had to go through a couple of winters, they love it. So.
Yeah. And then I believe we've seen the application for the downstream property, I think was last month. That's the one off of Willow that had the open stream, the very nicely planted open stream bed, which is the next property to the south on that.
Parallel street.
Right. The other side. Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Frangione on this? Any public questions or comments? Is there a motion? I'm sorry.
Before the agency moves, I'd like to add a special condition that the revised site plan showing features that DPW has requested, as well as the disconnection of the downspouts, be submitted prior to seeking building permit.
Okay, I will say so moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Mr. Chairman, the 56 Clapboard Ridge Road application was withdrawn by the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 2015-165 Indian Spring Road, William Kenny Associates for INCT LLC for declaratory ruling for forestry activities.
In the description that the agency received with your packets last week, this is a project that includes forestry management of selecting for particular specimen trees and desired species, as well as managing the understory to remove invasives, and then also a trail system through the property. Those are the three main components. The information that was provided in the first round of information, I felt substantiated that they were legitimate forestry practices, and they would, are consistent with an as-of-right use or non-regulated use. I did not have information at that time which allowed me to concur with the removal of the understory. As stated in the report, the first report, there was concern about ticks and an aesthetic goal, which neither of those is really tied into forestry or silviculture. I raised those points to the applicant, and Star Childs did respond back, and you will have the report. It was one of the other pieces that was up on the shelf here, which more cleanly tied the removal of the invasives to the overall forest health, and I thought the response was quite helpful and educational, and I would concur that the removal of the understory in the context of the overall plan, this is specifically within the context of the overall plan, to remove those invasives in order to promote the growth of native species, is appropriate for forest management, but only if those native species are fostered going forward. I still do not agree that the construction of the trail would fall in the as-of-right activity. Passive recreation certainly is an as-of-right activity, but fill and the structures of the boardwalks are not included in that Chapter 4. So those elements would, I would recommend those should come back for a permit.
I'd just like to add something to what you just said. 4.2C specifically says, use incidental to the enjoyment and maintenance of a residential property. This is not a residential property. It's either a forestry property or can't be both.
I believe the residential use, it's tied to the building lot size of the zone. And I think those elements are, if I'm remembering accurately, that's talking about the use is incidental and incidental maintenance of a residential property, and that's equal to the zone.
No, it's not the zone. It says equal to or smaller than the largest lot size permitted anywhere in the municipality.
Okay.
And this is larger.
Yes, this is also made up of several lots which do not have a residence associated with them.
Right. So I'm just pointing out that I believe we need to start with the fact that this is not a residential property, and we're not talking about enjoyment and maintenance of a residential property here. We're talking about something that's come in for forestry.
If you can have multiple uses, so if on the next, I'm sorry, I don't have my regulations with me. Thank you very much, Bill. So yes, 42C does speak to incidental uses associated with a residential property. Lawn, managing your foundation shrubs, trimming up trees, maintenance of your driveway. That's my understanding of what 42C is speaking to. The use of this property is twofold: the forestry management and the uses associated with that. And then there's also the request for the trail.
Right.
So the trail under 4.3, residential, or I'm sorry, outdoor recreation 4.3B, certainly hiking through your property, through your wetlands, is an as-of-right use. The difference is then when you're looking to bring in materials to facilitate that is the regulated component. I'm afraid I don't follow the logic. I don't believe 4.2A and 4.2C are meant to encompass, that they can't overlap. I think you can have a residential property that's managed for forestry uses all or in part.
I don't know, I would like to have some sort of a more legal interpretation.
Surely.
As to whether, if somebody comes in to declare a property as forest, whether or not it can be also used for residential purposes.
If you were to look at
Residential
Public Act 490, which is, deals with properties that are for tax purposes designated as farm, forest, or open space, you can have Public Act 490 affect a portion of your property. So if that's, I'm happy to speak with Mr. Wetmore and get something more definitive, but I can certainly think of at least that one structure of having forestry designation share a property with a residential use.
That's for tax purposes, though.
Yes, and the forestry element, so the portions of the property that are developed residentially don't get counted towards that forestry.
I don't think that's what Mr. Benton's getting at, though, the mixed use. He's saying if this, I mean, your point is you can have a residential property that has a forestry element.
Yes.
Is there such a thing as a forestry property that is not residential at all? That's a different question, it seems to me.
That is not residential at all.
Yeah, in other words, you can have a home
Yeah.
that functions as a residence that has forestry operations on it by virtue of its size or its topography or its, but this question is different in that there is no residence associated with this property.
Okay.
It's solely for forest. So to the extent there's an issue as to the interpretation of B in that context, maybe Mr. Wetmore can clarify that.
Well, B,
I mean, I don't
we
think,
don't have
I
to
don't
worry
think
about
one
B.
is debating that you can have residential, recreational use and forestry in the same site.
So the question is, can you have forestry without the residential?
No, the question is, can you have residential without a residence? If it's completely non-residential, and it is private, and it is not in any way a conservation area, can you still then treat it as something that you can use for residential, for, that's the word. I'm sorry, thank you, recreational purposes?
Well,
Yes, you would be able to.
But recognize where this is leading us. We also have 44 or 45 acres in Indian Spring Land Company.
Well, these do.
If they're going to then come in and say, hey, we're going to turn this because we want to be able to walk wherever we want to walk.
You're entitled to walk wherever you want to walk. I mean, the wetland regulations don't prohibit that.
It's a bit academic because of 4.3, which...
Anyway.
So these, in 4.2, these are not ands. These are independent criteria. 4B we can take off because building permits that were issued back in the 80s that this piece refers to, they're long gone. So A speaks to farming, which forestry is a type of agriculture.
Right.
That's been clearly established. C, to me, has always referenced if you have a parcel and you have it developed in its sort of regular residential use, and you're going to do something that's typical of a residential use, but it's within a regulated area, be it a buffer or the wetland or whatever it is, you're entitled to do such. But it's not, I do not, have not had occasions where A and C, people sought to combine those, breathing them together.
And the question then is, do you have the right to use a non-residential property for your own personal enjoyment in this way?
Yes.
As being.
I would, that would be a zoning question, and I believe that, yes. So open space, whether private or public, is an allowable use in a residential zone.
How many different uses can you have? I mean,
Oh, there's a bunch.
and is this property, for tax purposes, is this property considered forest? Okay, so here we have an area that, for tax purposes, is forest, that the owner will use for his own recreation as though it were residential.
No, that, walking through it does not make it residential. A house makes it residential.
No, I understand that, but he is using it as though it were residential, when it's not residential. In other words, he's
No,
getting a
I'm not sure.
tax benefit for having a forest, but he's treating it as though it was his backyard.
You can have a forest and manage it for forest and still have a trail through it without.
Just write down your query before she goes to the attorney.
I will write down and email my query to the board.
Thank you.
To everybody.
You could do that too, but
To
it'd be
Obama.
important for the town attorney to take a look at it probably.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Are there other agency questions on this?
Good evening, Bill Kenny here representing the property owner. So I think we're in agreement and everything except for the paths. And we would like to use the paths not only for recreational purposes in the future, but also as part of the forestry operation for moving equipment around the property. So we would request, based on that the paths also be considered an as-of-right activity.
Case law is very clear on creating farm roads. You have the right to drive, but you do not have a right to improve it. There's good case law on that one. So you wouldn't be able to resurface things in order to facilitate the equipment.
In the wetland, I know you can't put down fill. You can't change a wetland soil to a non-wetland soil.
There is nothing in the regulations that talks about various depths of fill. It's deposition of material. It's not quantified.
Okay, so
So the boardwalks and the fill, the deposited material being the wood chips, doesn't fall with any of the as-of-right activities.
okay. We are proposing the wood chips only in the upland areas, and so it would be boardwalk crossings where there's a wetland, and we'd have it raised above the wetland surface by a foot, so that we wouldn't have to drive the equipment through those wetland areas.
Not quite.
I thought it said here it's for hiking.
Right. I'm not quite sure where you're getting at with driving
Now we're using.
silviculture equipment across boardwalks.
Yes. So this isn't, we're not talking a clear cut where we're having huge logging trucks coming through there. It's more of a light forest management. Star Childs is here this evening with us, and he can get into more of the details of the forest management. I agree, the initial application, I did emphasize the recreational components of the paths, but they certainly will be used for the forest, access to the forest. ATV type size equipment, small forest management equipment, a mower or something like that.
You can access
yeah,
any place on the property without going through the wetland. You don't have to go through the wetland, do you? It's not mandatory to get to any place on that property by going through a wetland.
And best management practices would suggest that you go during low flow periods or during the winter when the ground is frozen anyway, so you would be able to cross.
So if we put aside the forestry component, what the sense of the agency, is this something that you would or would not approve for recreational purposes?
Don't know. We don't have it, there's no plans for the boardwalk. There's no
How about
plans.
just in concept? We're talking about raising it above the surface of the ground, posts every 8 feet on center.
You're asking the agency to rule on something without the plans to go with it.
No, I'm not asking for a ruling, I'm asking in concept. Is that something?
It's something that's a regulated activity in my mind.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
I'm only asking
Well-
because should we proceed with submitting an application
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Is it possible, the paperwork that we have submitted is essentially, it is the same as you would receive?
Sorry.
That's okay. It's the same type of documentation. You may want more detail, that's fine, but it's the same type of documentation, the amount of copies, all the miscellaneous paperwork that goes with it. We've submitted this with this package. Is it possible to switch this to a permit application rather than?
Rather than a request for an exemption?
Or it could be, what if it were to be received tonight so that we could start the process at the next meeting? You have all the paperwork,
It was not listed on the agenda as an application to be received. It had a specific purpose to be on the agenda for a declaratory ruling. So I would say that we're denying the public time or whatever. Given the history of neighborhood interest, I'd be reticent to direct the agency to, or suggest to the agency to do anything but stick by the book on this one for the protection of the applicant as well as the agency.
Yeah.
I don't even understand your request. Do you want to make it, what do you want to make it? It was for declaratory. Right.
switch to a permit application. Same paperwork. We submitted the same paperwork we would have with a permit application. And the date, the submission.
In
date
other
for
words,
the-
put it on the list of applications to be received for the next hearing?
Yes.
What would be the procedure? I guess that's a technical requirement, right?
Well, also, and I guess it's a question of, are these vernal pools? Is this a metapopulation? Are the boardwalks going to cause undue shading? It's, we're talking about, a lot of details that would need to get fleshed out.
And the other question is, should it be a public hearing and not a simple application?
I would say these are all reasons why you got to come back with a proper application. It would be deemed incomplete for tonight, which is not a good place to be.
And, well,
But what we can do is we can cull the maps so you don't have to reproduce those. We will, from a document management perspective, try to,
Save you a couple bucks.
yeah, a little time.
well, is it appropriate to make comments on what is before us as to its conceptual acceptability or not, or is that inappropriate?
I'd be careful with that one.
Yeah, I would wait.
Anybody can make any application they want. And it would be my job to provide you with guidance if there are things that I think that you are going to be bringing to the agency that I think that the agency might have issue with. That's my responsibility to you. I wouldn't want the agency to have any expression of preconceived position on it.
So where does that leave us
What
then?
are we asking
Are you
for?
requesting
A full application.
delay, a withdrawal?
No, I think,
My understanding of where this all shook out is that there's a request for me to speak with town council to be certain with regards to this issue of residential versus forestry and coincidence of use. So delay the determination of whether that's as of right or not. The component of the trail, I believe the consensus of the agency is that does not qualify as an as of right. And if that's something that the applicant would like to pursue, then they should do so with a proper application. Does that cover it?
Well, I thought that we were saying that the forestry operation, the pure forestry operation, was acceptable, and that was as of right.
Yeah.
The question that was in my mind was as to the paths, and whether justifying the paths as a residential use was permissible And therefore, we get back to the same place. If they want the paths, then they have to make an application. But I thought the civil culture was acceptable.
Okay, then I'm totally missed it.
We should talk.
We should talk. The paths, that is listed, so hiking is listed as a passive recreation use. It's not listed as a residential use of land. So whether it's private or public doesn't change.
All right.
It's
Then
being
I
passive
withdraw my
recreation.
comment and my question.
Okay,
Okay? But the paths are certainly not part of the civil culture.
that is correct.
Okay, so if we take it into two parts, the civil culture to me is acceptable. The paths require an application.
We are like this. We're right on the same mark. The long rain round, but yes, we're there.
Okay.
And these paths are, as you said, they have to be suitable for ATV use, not just walking, hiking paths. So there's some
Right, we'd like
detail you're going to need.
to have access equipment.
So they become forestry roads.
They're roads.
Well, let's see what he comes back with.
May want to
And you may
take a
want to
step back
think
and
about
decide
that
what-
and decide whether you just want paths or whether the idea of using them as forestry roads might have been justification for the paths as opposed to,
And we would, so this request for declaratory ruling, Star Childs did submit 2 reports which outlines the nature of this forestry management. And to me, that's just like somebody who says, I'm putting a house here. I would not expect this forestry management to convert over to a logging practice. So the reports that were submitted, to me, are the guiding documents of what we should be expecting out there for forestry management.
right.
And to that, there is information in the documents that you just received today, so you wouldn't have had an opportunity to read, which talks about low-impact vehicles and smaller scale. So, short timing on that.
Mr. Kenny, is there someplace in the regulations that authorizes an applicant to seek a declaratory ruling? How did you come upon that idea?
I know from experience, I couldn't direct you to the specific section in your regulations, but I know that in most towns, it says that you have the right to do certain activities. However, first you must go before the agency, and the agency must make a determination of whether or not that is an as-of-right activity. So,
Norman, that's section 4.1 of the regulations. I think.
You know, and we've had experience with
it's
people.
4.1, it's about just
Yes.
below halfway down the
Okay.
first paragraph.
Right. We've had experience with people who have embarked on what ultimately turned out to be exempt activities without the agency's prior concurrence, and they were in a violation.
Got it.
So that you have to get the agency to acknowledge it's exempt.
Personally, I'm more in favor of submission of an actual application for permit in which everything is concretely laid out, and we have a basis for determining, rather than making a decision in the abstract, we just look at some concrete facts and proposals and make a determination based on that. That's just my opinion.
For the paths?
Yes.
Yeah, and I would say that I think you have to justify why you need to put a path in for what really is relatively little amount of work. I mean, yes, you have to go through it once and clean it out, but you're not going to be doing that every couple of months. So the question is, why would you need to put a fairly extensive network of paths just for something that, you're not going to really use a lot? So I think there has to be a justification for that. So tying it in with what you're actually going to do, why do you have to have all these paths?
Okay. So where does that leave us with a motion to delay?
Well,
Or
we would
to
appreciate
the
the
declare-
determination for the forestry activities.
Brian, I think there's some public here want to
Yep,
comment, would that be
yep.
appropriate?
Okay. Yep, let me open this up to the public. Yes, please. Hi, please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Lucia Jansen. I am a neighbor at 8 Sydney Lanier Lane. I'm one of the many neighbors that border this property. I received a letter from Mr. Kenny's company, and I called him to ask about the paths, because that brought my attention. And Mr. Kenny was very forthcoming in saying that what conceptually was the idea, but very little facts. So I was not able to know any detail as it relates to what we're talking about here. What size the path is, what is it going to be made out of, what grading there is. Now I'm very surprised to hear there's an ATV capable path going to be constructed, because that wasn't mentioned in the conversation. So I'm respectfully requesting that, as a neighbor who has great appreciation for the wetlands, and there are 10 wetland systems in this area, and I'm very close to this wetland area. I would hate to see this ecosystem disturbed by extensive development, for lack of a better word. So, and that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. What'd you do? Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Any other members of the public here? No?
Can I ask one question, please? Your forestry operations, I'm familiar with most of the wetlands on these properties, but not all of them. Have you found any areas that look like they're maybe vernal pool breeding habitat?
I think there probably are.
Is there any sort of adjustment that would be made to the forestry operation in and around those areas? And the reason I ask is not that the agency can restrict the forestry operation, but the regulations do encourage applicants to consider incorporating best management practices within their exempt operations.
Yes, thank you. Star Childs, the forester, Ecos Incorporated, and who prepared the original forestry assessment for the property and then proceeded to lay out at least the first stage of what we're proposing to do here. The vernal wetlands, as they were on the map that's filed with the assessor's office, actually, the original just field map that we did, this is a small vernal wetland here, and then there's a pretty good pool here that exists into the spring somewhat substantially. These are otherwise perched wetlands. This is a drain from an additional vernal pool system up here that just bleeds through a stone wall, and then so it's just a very seasonal wet ground drainage channel. And this could be considered a vernal pool, but it doesn't hold the water long enough. It's just a very small compression. All of these other areas are just drainage or would be mapped as wetland soils. And then this is the drain from this pool here, but very quickly in the spring, this pool stops draining or overflowing, and then this becomes just a dry intermittent stream channel. And so that's why the proposed crossing is there. Very similar to another property that I've worked on adjacent to this, and to you and I and many of you have spent a lot of time talking about. The forestry here is very much to improve the health of the existing forest, to deal with the serious invasive plants that have moved in here, vines that are overtopping very significant trees, They did suffer, this property suffered, obviously, in Sandy, as many properties in Greenwich did. At this point, I don't know to the extent that much of that wood is salvageable, but that's the sort of intent of having a network of trails, albeit these are trails that won't be gravelled or improved or culverted or anything like that. But the idea would be to sort of come in, as I said in the report that I sent back to the director here, to Patricia, that the idea is this would be a staging area here. Obviously, yes, you could drive into this property here, 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 and here, but that has now sort of become gentrified, if you will, that edge of that driveway coming in. But this is an extension, obviously an improved dead end here, or a lollipop turnaround that no longer exists. But it would make a perfect place for staging wood pickup, which would be the log trucks like we've discussed in the past. And the equipment that we've ended up using on the adjacent property would be capable. It's only got about a 6 foot wide wheelbase, so could travel over a very narrow, small bridge that wouldn't have, and I'm not talking here about the type of bridge that we've had some discussions on in the past, which had to carry a fully loaded log truck. And the purpose for that was to get the forestry operations there out of everybody's face. And this is sort of similar here. This is the obvious staging area if you were to choose this network of roads, furthest from any of the neighbors except for the actual rock ledge property, which is the residential property that is adjacent and contiguous to this wooded portion of their property.
Okay, it sounded to me like the agency was looking to get an application for any of this road system. And it sounded to me like they're willing to acknowledge the agricultural exemption for the forestry operation.
Right.
My only question was, if there are two vernal pools, your forestry operation, are there any accommodations that you plan making to treat those differently than you're going to treat the whole rest of the property?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, without question, we would stay, we recognize the same setbacks that we've agreed to, that I've agreed to before. And there wouldn't be any of the operations in and around the pool envelope or within whatever the 50-foot margin back from there. So there'd be no disturbance to these. I think you'd agree if you went out there and looked that these would class as vernal wetlands, ephemeral pooled wetlands. They have been, but as with many of them, they've dried up pretty substantially.
Would you consider a 100-foot setback? I've never been really happy with where we ended up with the setbacks on the other property that we discussed.
I think that's excessive, but I'm willing to consider it. But
just because I think the two of those probably form a network.
They may.
They are so close.
It's a possibility. I haven't done extensive studying of that, but 100-foot might be. I would say 50 would be the machine operation. We could still do the forestry within 100 feet, but I think the agreement I had before was 50 feet, no machine operation. So, but, extraction from 100 feet, we could do that. Yeah, but we're not in a application here at this point.
Right.
Just discussing silvicultural.
We are in a declaratory
ruling discussion,
context, so I think
forestry part of it, I think
Bob's point is a valid one to the extent we're saying this is agriculturally exempt and allowable activity, that the acknowledgement of vernal pools requires us to, add to our declaration the best management practice requirements that you point out, or guidelines, and maybe even discuss the buffer if we want to.
Well, I think the important thing is it's on the record now that there will be an accommodation made, and like you said, you could continue to discuss what that is, but that's an accommodation, limiting their exemption, which is very nice of them.
I guess my question regarding the pathways are, if you're really able to sort of travel wherever, why even show the pathways on the map at all?
Well, I think in this case, the owners of the property, when the initial forestry work is done, see that as a possible, bridle trail, walking trail, driving trail, and for the purposes of, there was a question about, you'll do this once and never come back. I think this is an ongoing management plan, that we've entered into. It will involve replanting of native shrubs.
Right, so there is a plan.
So there'll be a need to bring that kind of equipment and that kind of stuff back. So it will be a network, a trunk road, if you will, from which we can then branch off and go, yes. But the idea is to get onto the higher, non-erosive parts of the property, and that's why it's sort of a trunk road. Obviously, to get to here, we'll come off of this part and work in this area. To get around to this part, we'll come in there. And partly that's just in favoring the fact that you're not coming right across from the owner's house with the road right in. So that's why we put it at the end of the lollipop that zoning approved 100 years ago. I don't know when they approved the end of Indian Spring Road, had that lollipop, but it's a natural finished. Now it's all grassed in, but
It just seems to me that there's no part of that property you can't access and avoid going over a wetland. There's no need to traverse any of the wetlands there.
yeah, but you're traversing maybe about a foot there.
But
and
you don't need to do
2
that
feet
at
there.
all.
Yes, but you're right.
You mean you can come in there, you can come in there, you can come in
The
there?
proposed network is in deference to the aesthetics of the property. I mean, foresters do tend to think about their landowners' aesthetics too, in terms of where they put operational.
But we're just thinking about the wetlands, that's all.
I know, I understood that, but that's why forestry gets that exemption for wetlands, that's the thing. So, but the plan is to.
You don't get an exemption for wetlands in order to satisfy the owners. You get an exemption for wetlands in order to use the
Within the law
property
for
for
farming,
silviculture.
yes. No, but you come to it to
Right,
get
but you don't need to cross the wetlands to get to the forest.
Right, but yeah, some of that's finished, yeah.
I know what it is. I've seen you put in the cobbles along the side of the road.
Yeah.
Okay, you can cross it.
Yeah, but no, it's not just cobbles, it's grass and
I
trees and
know,
all
and
that.
you can cross it.
Yeah,
With those wonderful trucks that you can drive through the forest without any damage.
Yeah, but
So what you're
it's
saying.
the truck that's removing wood that's got to come up here, though, so that's.
Yeah, that's
why the
quite
wood
all
comes
right.
to there.
I mean,
Okay,
if-
yeah.
So what you're saying,
I don't think we completely understand forestry, but that's all right.
so what you're saying then is that in your mind, there are prudent and feasible alternatives to crossing the wetlands that you can see.
You're just telling me how to maneuver
Stop
my
kicking
logs.
Anyways,
He's telling me there's other ways to pull the logs out of the property to the road, but to the
Yes.
roadside, yes.
Yes.
But there's no real
Okay.
need to. I mean, the obvious place to bring them is here, over up in the end of here, not on the side of this already finished. I mean, they've spent a lot of money finishing the sides of that driveway.
Mr. Childs,
Understood.
that's not the issue, how much money they've spent
Right, I know.
finishing the road through the
Trying to
wetlands.
find the best way to get to
All
the
right,
logs.
you can bring the logs to the road, you can then drag them or carry them or have a group of people pick them up and walk with them to the place where the trucks are. You don't have to go through the wetlands. It's that simple.
Oh, well, all right, it's a minor crossing, but yes, okay. I see your point, I guess. But not really. But it's where I would go if I was bringing my wood out, which I plan to do.
So what's before us is a determination on a forestry exemption minus anything to do with the pathways or the roads. Someone like to make a motion on that?
Basic forestry.
Or do we need to, or would you like to wait until we hear from Mr. Wetmore?
No, I don't need to hear from Mr. Wetmore, I just don't know how to state state the motion and keep the trucks out of the wetlands. Take a shot, Pat.
You don't actually have the right to keep the trucks out of the wetland for forestry management.
Yes, you do.
You don't
They
need
don't
to
get
what?
the
I'm
right,
sorry?
They don't get the right to cross the wetlands if they can avoid it, and they can avoid it.
No, it's not what it says.
What does it say?
That's not what it says.
It's not what it says.
What does it say?
What was your comment, Pat?
That we don't have, in the context of a forestry management exemption, we do not have the ability to condition that to stay out of the wetland.
Point to me where.
They can go in.
I mean, it's 4.2A. This is the, you can't have a road, you can't have a building.
Right.
You can't have fill.
But there,
You can't have continual clear flow or clear cutting of timber.
Right. But there
All
are-
those limitations that we've looked at before with regard to this exemption.
Right.
So to unequivocally say you can't cross the wetland is
Right.
not an acceptable
because,
addition to any declaration. I think we should limit this declaration to a recognition of the agricultural exemption and leave it at that, and let's go from there.
Second.
Is there a need to do that?
Yeah, because we're here for a declaration
Right.
under 4.1.
because best management practices.
An alternative would
before-
be to deny the application for declaration on the grounds.
I don't know if I have a basis to basis to.
Say that again?
The application contains about the trails. So either that's gets struck out, or the whole thing gets.
Well, the declaration would be that the agricultural exemption is permitted or recognized
That's
without
what
the
it-
trails.
Right. It has to be, I think it has to be recognized that you're not allowing trails.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct. I don't think anyone
We all
is
agree.
inclined to do that.
Okay.
So that's my motion.
Okay,
Do we have sufficient factual basis as required in the section for making this determination? Or are we just making it as of law?
No, the representation of the forester in his submission and Pat's report is what I'm basing it on.
I'm very
With what?
accepting a lot of narrative from Mr. Starling and others regarding what is going to happen, what may not happen, especially in the light of the fact that one of the neighbors had a personal conversation with Mr. Kenny and was really, you know, I don't know, I wasn't present at
Right.
that conversation.
I'd love an opportunity just to briefly.
We haven't got proper
Mr.
record.
Kenny was not
So-
present at that conversation, and so I don't know what really happened, but the statement by the neighbor is enough to raise doubts in my mind that there's really not a sufficient factual basis for making much of any kind of a determination other than a restatement of the law.
No, a determination of, that they're going to conduct forestry activities? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I disagree. So I think the narrative is clear that the declaration here was to have a declaration to, as the 4.1 says, to rule that there is a proposed operation in use that is permitted as a non-regulated operation in use. And I think that was clear in the narrative, it's clear in Mr. Child's submission. So on that level alone, my motion would be to make that declaration with the very specific proviso that the ambiguities, the unclear parts of this narrative with regard to recreational use, pathways, the types of vehicles, the vernal pool aspect of all this is not clear, and that for that reason, that should not be part of this declaration. And I guess I'd add one other thing, which is Bob's point, that there is an acknowledgement of vernal pools on this property, and there is an acknowledgement by the forester himself, and I assume Mr. Kenny wouldn't disagree, of the need to have best management practices in the context of any of this regulated use related to the vernal pools. So that's my long-winded motion.
okay. I will second that.
Let me second it, because I can
Okay.
accept that.
Okay, all right. Any discussion before we vote? No? All in favor?
Any guy who missed
Okay.
he will never, ever.
But no.
Agent approvals. We move this around. Okay, 2 agent approvals, 2015. 161, 14 Cat Rock Road. Rockaby DeAndrea, Inc. for Miriam Sayed for construction of a residential addition and retaining walls, renovation of a deck, and installation of a drainage system 45 feet from a wetland. The second one is 2015-163, 9 Hobart Drive. Anaheim Kirby LLC. Please take that outside. Thank you. For Jennifer Harris for construction of a residential addition 45 feet from wetlands. Bye-bye. No motions required on these, right?
No,
Any
and,
questions? Anything?
We also have 15-153, 407 Round Hill, and 15-160, 160 South Water Street that were moved over to agent approvals.
Okay. Very good. So noted. Okay, applications to be received. Do I need to read these in?
I don't believe that you need to read them in one by one. I would like to call to the attention of the agency number 11, so if you do make a summary motion, that you pull number 11 out. There's a request from the applicant to have a discussion of the fee associated with this project.
This is
Oh.
number 11. What is this? I'm sorry, I'm not following you, Bruce.
I think you guys don't have the new agenda. We've got to fix this.
Maybe it's the new agenda.
Don't have.
No, we don't have a new agenda.
We have a
So
white-
the annotated agenda that I send you guys, what do you do with it?
The last attachment you had did not have the annotated agenda.
No, it didn't have it.
You had a
Didn't have
dozen
it?
attachments, but you didn't have the annotated agenda.
I apologize.
So
So
the whole meeting is,
you guys have done very well.
we were not working.
It's on the website.
Okay, so then if I may,
Go to the website.
let me read the, we've got 2015, 166, 167, 168, 169, 170, 171, 172, 73, 74, 75, and 177 are on the agenda for applications to be received.
Okay. Very good. We have to make a motion to receive the agenda, the aforementioned items.
Joe?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Second.
All right, okay.
Then the outstanding one is 215, 176, 47 Valley Drive. This is an application for two multifamily buildings. According to our fee structure, if it was to be followed as written, the fee would wind up being in the order of $200,000. So,
Oh, yeah.
and I know your staff is
What was the
worth
shortfall?
their weight in gold, but
But what was the budget shortfall?
Our budget problems are over. You take 6 months off, gang.
So high.
So what are we doing now? So this is on as a application to be received?
yes, so prior to receiving it,
Carved-out discussion with regard to a fee?
yes.
Okay.
If I may. We submitted the application, as Director Sesto indicated, on Friday, within the deadline. We're here to have you receive it. The question is about the fee, what fee should be set for this project. As you know, it's within your regulations to waive a fee or adjust it based on whether it's excessive or not. And let me just explain what's being proposed here. What's being proposed is 2 multifamily buildings with 96 units with an 830G affordable housing component as an independent elderly living facility. It's located on a site you may be familiar, 47 Valley Drive, which was an old Johnson Lee site. He had proposed 4 cluster developments many years ago. If you can see, the only reason I'm bringing this to your attention is to show you where the wetlands are, which is the green highlighted area, which is in a small portion of the site. This is a 2-acre site. So it's not a large, excuse me, yes? It's not a large site, it's a small site. And, but because of the number of units, when we literally apply the fee calculation, we get to 200. I submitted a letter with the application, basically requesting a fee of $11,000. And I reached that calculation by applying the site disturbance fee of $8,000 and then an additional fee of $3,000 for review and the $60 estate fee. As you know, the standard in the state statutes is a reasonable fee to cover the cost of your review. When you have a per unit cost, it's anticipated to have a large site with many units or many, let's say you've got a single family units across 30 or 40 acres, or maybe multiple impacts to wetlands or drainage systems, it would be a type of situation where you would want to charge a significant fee to cover the cost post-approval review. But in this particular case, it's 2 acres, 2 footprints, high density, but they really won't impact the wetlands other than what you see there, and we would suggest a fee of $11,000, and we open it up for your discussion.
It's 2 buildings?
2 buildings, yes.
With how many units?
Well, the total number of units would be 96.
Story buildings.
Two 5-story buildings?
4 and 5, or 5 and 5, yeah.
Okay.
Now, the massing and density, of course, is another issue. We'll be before planning and zoning on that.
So when you and I
yes,
conversed on this
correct.
issue, I had asked if you could come back with information to me, the saying 8,000 plus 3,000 is arbitrary. And I had asked if you could be more specific to this development, this property, as it relates to the fee structure. The agency, clearly, when they included a per-unit fee, they had something in mind.
Right.
So to disregard it outright, I don't think gives due to the consideration that went into making that fee schedule to begin with. And then I'm concerned about the logic that you are utilizing with your request, because it does not make this parcel unique. So then anybody can come up and say, here's what I was thinking.
Right. So
So
all right.
help me with that
Yeah.
part.
No, all right. Let me just try to show you why we reached that number, if I could.
Mm-hmm. Is the copy of the, what was your name again? I'm sorry. What was your name?
Frank Napolitano.
Is the copy of Mr. Napolitano's letter available?
No, I was unaware that it was with the application documents that just came in on Friday, so my apologies for not having that.
Do you have a
for
copy of your letter?
345 West Putnam.
So the letter references 2 projects. We referenced first the site itself, which when it was reviewed in 2005, there was a $4,000 fee that was assessed for that review. It's 4 units on this site. That's in the old fee schedule. But in addition, we looked at 345 West Putnam Avenue, which was proposed 267 units on 15 acres with multiple wetland sites. That was also in the pre-current schedule, and that fee was $10,000 with a $1,000 hearing fee. And that included the $4,000 site disturbance, 50% site disturbance fee, which was $4,000 at the time.
That was tollgate. That was tollgate.
Tollgate, yeah.
Oh, geez.
So what we
$10,000?
$10,000. We checked it twice. We asked Marissa, and that's what it was. We were surprised, but
And that was under the old fee schedule, so
it-
I would imagine
Right.
that the agency might have saw a problem with that and adjusted the fee schedule. That's what I'm thinking.
well, it may, but that doesn't gainsay the need to have the fee structure be based on a reasonableness as to what it's going to require the agency to conduct the review and the post-approval review. That's the standard that the state has articulated
Yeah.
in allowing the commission to come up with a fee. So
I agree.
Okay.
But you still have not provided any reasoning that makes 11,060 logical for this particular property, and that logic doesn't then translate to everybody who thinks that the fee as per the schedule is not correct.
So can I just, how many units in each of those buildings again?
it's 96 combined,
And how many floors do you have?
5 floors.
That's roughly equal.
Equal, yeah. A little more in the more eastern building than in the other.
Floor.
About that. The thing is we're looking at a footprint, that we're showing you a design. The site engineer is here, Tony DeAndrea. He can speak to how this proposal will impact the wetlands, even though that's not what we're doing this evening. But we're not doing that at all. But
Right.
what I'm trying to say is the way we constructed the proposal is we took the site disturbance fee under the current schedule of $8,000. We then looked at this site, we looked at what we believe to be the impact, and we looked at what you've done in other cases when you've tried to assess under a prior schedule, and we said it's been a larger piece of property with more units. And so we took that difference, which was $6,000, and we said, well, we're looking at a property that's a lot smaller with less units, with a defined wetlands that's very small in the area of the property, and came up with this fee. Now, if you want, we could do a per unit fee. I can tell you right now we're at $30 per unit if we want to break it down that way. At $500 a unit, it would be $48,000. So when we look at a per unit fee, if we were to look at it that way, would that be commensurate with the type of review that would be required for this site? I mean, under reasonableness standards, I'm not sure that would.
As I've said to you, I fully
yes,
support that
correct.
$200,000 is not reasonable. We are good, but what I had really hoped that you would do was recognize that the agency created that fee schedule with something in mind, knowing that developments, you have multiple floors, and they still came up with that per unit cost. And I think there are elements of this application that do make it unique. It is a 830G, so you're going up 5 stories,
Right.
when in this type of development, without that component, would be maybe 3, at the most 4 stories. So now you're adding number of units without adding footprint of disturbance.
Right.
You have the parking underneath the building, so again, the footprint is contained.
Right.
You have a predominance of one-bedroom units, which are smaller, so you have, your unit count is higher
Right.
than
That's
you
right.
might have. So I would have really loved to have you come in and say, if this was more conventional, we would have had maybe a third of those number of units when the market for this type of property might have been 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. So our unit count would have been lower. We would have had without the 830G, we would have had only how many floors? So how many floors would have accommodated how many units? And extrapolated what makes this unique and a tangible argument to have a discussion around, rather than we took 8 and then we figured 3 on top of that, because it was just kind of like a thing that was before the new fee schedule. It doesn't really, it's not defendable.
I understand, go ahead.
Well, I just had a question regarding, because regarding Tollgate, it turned into a public hearing. It went for months and months, literally. And I would imagine that the agency could cost the agency well beyond $11,000 because of the public response to it, regardless of whether there's a little wetland or a big wetland on the property. There is more wetlands on there, but it was reflective of public interest. Are we going to anticipate the same type of public reaction to 5-story buildings going up?
I think we should.
Or not? And so, should the fee better reflect that or not? That's just a general question to the fellow members.
I think it should.
Yeah,
I think your point is absolutely right. This is
I think-
contiguous to Georgetown. It's one property over from the old toll gate, isn't it? Essentially.
Not
Same,
in the same area, but not that close, but it's.
but all of the Oak Street and all of those folks are gonna, I would think, once they find out about this, are gonna come out of the woodwork.
I would ask agency members, or Bob and Doreen, do you remember the rationale? Were you here? I know you were here, but do you remember specifically what drove that $2,000 per unit?
Complex.
Well, I think, in a way, I agree with what Mr. Napolitano said about if you got a proposal for a new West Lion farm with condominiums that are detached units over 50 acres, which you know, I don't know where that would go now, but that was part of the idea that, you know, geez, people began to look, we got nothing to cover that kind of eventuality. But a lot of it came out of Tollgate, because that was, you know, that just was way, you know, that was one where we didn't cover our costs. And now, was there an overshoot when you apply that unit cost to this project?
Sure.
Maybe. That's what you have to explain.
Right, so,
What is the square footage of each of those buildings? Roughly.
it's about, if it was about 50?
Footprint?
I think it's a
Footprint, yeah.
Oh, the
I just-
footprint?
The footprint, that's what
Yeah. I mean, one of the big things with Tollgate was the fact that there was a massive amount of blasting involved. And it came down to potential wetlands impacts because of exposed rock and things such as that. So
There was a lot of wetlands, though, too.
It was a lot of wetlands. We have one off on the corner,
Yeah.
but you do have, I don't want to get into the particulars of the application, but it does look like you've got underground parking. I don't
We do,
know.
yes.
And so
Can I,
I think you're going to run into similar issues and pushback and analysis that's going to need to happen. So is $11,000 reasonable, given that?
I mean, let's stick with your letter and the regulations, right? I think as a group, we can say that the per unit rationale just doesn't apply literally here, right?
Right.
No,
So,
point of information, I'd just like to understand what the per unit charge is under normal circumstances.
$2,000 a unit.
Per unit, thank you.
So if we accept that that doesn't apply literally, then, and I think to say it's only 2 units wouldn't make sense either. So let's look at the other rationale, which is the reasonable cost of reviewing and acting on applications, petitions, and monitoring compliance. So we do have Tollgate as sort of a baseline. But what we don't have is what that equates to in terms of a reasonable fee. So my question is, is there a way to table this so we can give this some additional discussion without encumbering this from being put on the list of applications to be reviewed?
I
think it's within your authority to do that.
I would
That's
agree.
what I recommend we do, and just get a copy of this attorney's letter and give some thought to the sections that apply.
I think that's a good idea. Just to answer 2 questions, it's about 30,000 feet in terms of footprint on the site. That's just building coverage, not lot coverage. But also, as Director Sesto was asking about, we could say, okay, if we were to build this under a less intensive zoning scheme, we would come up with 30 units in 3 stories. And then we could say, well, what would the fee be for that? But I don't know if that really correlates to the wetlands, the impact of wetlands.
To me, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't. I mean, it's a good thought. It would give some rationale to a setting of a fee, but I think the better rationale here is to give some more thought to the intensive amount of time and analysis and review that this is going to take in the context of what they're proposing and that wetland and the size of the lot. And then we can put our arms around it and come up with a more reasonable fee, as opposed to just, right now, I just think a number we come up with is going to be a little too arbitrary.
Units are almost irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the unit argument was more when you're talking about standalone condos and
Yeah, I agree.
row houses, things like that.
Let me suggest another alternative, which may not even be legitimate.
That's candid of you.
What would it cost to put 2 houses?
No. What if we keep track of our actual costs? And can't do that, huh? You've got to project it.
It's got to be upfront.
Got to be
Yeah,
upfront. I told you, it might not be legitimate.
It's a good idea.
So what would the mechanism be for determining the fee at a later time without unduly delaying them? Or?
So I think that you can, the issue of delaying it, the agency, as Mr. Napolitano has pointed out, the agency has a lot of discretion on this, so you can receive it and its calendar can start moving. We can work on the fee schedule issue kind of in parallel.
Okay.
I just caution the agency to be really careful in devising a way to come up with an application fee that you don't open yourself up to creating precedents.
Precedent that you wouldn't, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we've got to really be careful that you're creating.
Which is why I'm not ready to commit to a number right now.
Right.
Yeah, I'm fine not to.
And is there a, I don't want to use the word multiplier, but for lack of a better term, is there a public hearing multiplier? Because you know what's going to happen when it goes to public hearing.
You don't always know.
You don't
And
know.
that's part of my concern about
Yeah.
predetermining whether a project is going to be controversial or not controversial and trying to make a fee based on, because every project, so, 407 Round Hill, do they get a discount? Because that really was pretty simple. I think that that's a double-edged sword.
Right.
I would prefer to see a logic drawn out of this. Maybe this is more like a commercial educational setup as opposed to a residential setup. Something that can point to this structure
They're commercial
without
buildings.
disregarding this structure.
That sounds good. We'll provide, we can probably talk and we can provide information based on what we're hearing that will help the agency get to a spot so that we don't delay it and we'll get to a level of comfort in reaching a fee.
I mean, give some insight as
Sure.
to, how we can monetize or quantify that criteria that's set off in 19.1, then we can put our arms around it and come up with a reasonable number.
Because really it is, the typology is almost 2 office buildings with parking underneath.
Yeah. Good point. Good observation, yeah.
When might we see a full application?
Well, the application's been submitted. It's here.
Official, okay.
It is,
So are we
yes.
accepting this as an application?
Yeah, that's
That's why it came in, okay.
Right,
Sorry.
that was the reason we're here.
the whole thing.
P.S. on the bottom line, you've got Valley Road.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
It's a mistake that many people make.
Yes, I know.
To their chagrin. Question, how many doorways are there?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I can't. I don't have the elevation.
What? Well, there's one for every apartment.
No, I meant exterior from the buildings.
Well, it's going to have
At least 2.
They're going to be
have some
elevator buildings.
activities, elevators and a green roof with a plaza. So there will be, there will be a significant number of access onto the plaza.
Well, what would we do for commercial buildings?
Well, it's something we can look.
Sorry?
I think it's $4,000 is the basic fee.
And then there's the additional fee based on disturbance.
You got 2 buildings.
Just $12,000.
That gets us to 20.
That gets you to 16.
16, yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going in the right direction.
Thank
we
you.
don't need a
Thank you very much. Okay,
All
we
right.
will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion to release the bonds.
So moved.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye.
Second.
Thanks.
Done.
Jim,
You
would you
want your
second
letter
that?
back, Frank?